With 9 cents a litre cheaper, it still cost him $73 to fill up his VW Golf. The drop in gas prices recently reflecting a 5% drop in oil prices. As well, another factor could be new COVID lockdowns in China, which would reduce significantly that country's demand for oil. Kevin Meisner, City News.
City News time 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Mixed precipitation on the way, but not until later into the afternoon, into the evening. We'll start with some light snow. The high +2. Snow will change over to a mix of rain and snow through the evening and a risk of freezing rain overnight as the temperature rises. For today, the high +2.
Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's -6 degrees. Now, as we prepare for an early spring resembling late winter weather, that's coming this afternoon. There are warnings up along several American states today, tornado and hurricane force winds. Forecast for much of the American South. Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, they're all in the firing line of this storm, according to meteorologist Ginger Z.
This line's going to cross the Mississippi River about 2-3 p.m. just west of us here in Jackson. By 4, it'll be here. Embedded in that, you will have 80-plus mile-per-hour winds from Paducah down to, say, Biloxi or Gulfport. I don't want to leave out all along the Gulf Coast, Pensacola, Destin, Hattiesburg, up into Tuscaloosa. Have to watch late this evening, too.
Another tornado watch is up for parts of Arkansas, Louisiana, Missouri, Oklahoma, as well as Texas. City News time 9:02. Russia may have said it was scaling back operations around the Ukrainian capital, but it doesn't mean they've stopped the pummeling of other areas.
Ukraine's state agency for emergencies says the death toll in a Russian strike on the regional administration building in the southern city of Mykolaiv has risen to 14 after rescuers removed one more body from the rubble and another person died of wounds at a hospital. Authorities say Russian forces had blasted a gaping hole in the 9-story government building in a strike on Tuesday morning. The regional governor has charged that they waited for people to go to work before striking it. I'm Charles Tulatesma.
City News time 9:03. The City Auditor General has agreed to examine the Ottawa Police response to the downtown occupation. Natalie Gaujean has written the Mayor and Council accepting that request from the Police Services Board. Now, in the memo, Gaujean says her office is well suited to examine the issue. Not everyone agrees with that. She describes a task as of significant magnitude. That does include consultation with the people of Ottawa who were affected by the demonstration. The board did ask for the review to be done in time for Canada Day's preparations. Gaujean says while the city manager and police chief will be kept up to date with issues that could be used in future events, her office will take the time needed to complete that review. Ottawa police continue looking for a missing 15-year-old. You can see pictures up at ottawa.citynews.ca. Lucas Chenier was last seen 10 days ago now in the Strandherd-Woodruff area of Barrhaven. He is the man who is capable of walking long distances. Police feel he could be in places like Cornwall, Kingston, or Montreal. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Say X,
he's got the Y.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, if it's really going to be 16 degrees tomorrow, I don't mind. I'll suffer through a little bit of freezing rain. I'll take that trade. 16 degrees tomorrow, David. What time do you tee off?
2:30.
2:30. Yeah, I'm not surprised. That would not be a record high. However, the record high in Ottawa, March 31st, tomorrow, 23 degrees. Set back in 2006. I mean, it's that time of year. Looking up the weather records, I heard Jill call it this morning. It's the battle between early spring and late winter. So right. You can get any kind of weather. Okay. On this day, 1977, 25 degrees. You'd take that right about now, wouldn't you? 25 degrees. 1941, minus 12. Record low. And in 1939, we had 18 centimeters of snow. So take your pick. It's early spring in the Ottawa Valley. And good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. Wow, so much to talk about today. The federal government is expected to release more details soon about its plan to settle what it calls an unlimited number of Ukrainians and their families here in Canada. Almost 60,000 are trying to get here. They've applied so far. The hope is they'll start arriving soon. But the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress has many concerns, saying, as far as it knows, the government's not created any kind of registry of people to connect with them, with sponsors, with community supports. And, you know, if you heard the Sam LaPrade show yesterday, I was listening to Sam's show on the way home yesterday. She did an interview about how poorly the federal government is still doing at trying to resettle Afghan refugees. You know, the people we left behind in Afghanistan. Sam interviewed a man by the name of Ali Mirzad. Incredible interview. It's on our website. Frustrating, maddening information. Ali's with an organization called the Canadian Hazara Humanitarian Services. And in his opinion, it's been a debacle. It's been a debacle. You might even go so far as to call it a disgrace, the way immigration officials have handled that file, given how, you know, these are people who helped the Canadian forces in Afghanistan during all those years of war. And there is some concern that when it comes to the situation with Ukrainians trying to come to Canada, the government just doesn't have its act together. There's a new minister in charge of that department, Sean Fraser, Nova Scotia area Liberal MP, and I think it's fair to say he has failed to impress so far. I think that's fair to say. But our interview with a spokesperson from the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress is coming up shortly here on the Rob Snow Show. Then, right after the 9:30 news, it's time to score your political fix for the week. And where do you start this week? There's so much material to work with. There was a new climate plan announced yesterday by the Trudeau government. We will have a lot of coverage of this story this morning. 270 some odd pages. Some say it's a good start. Good start. Okay, good start. Some say this is a failure of leadership. It doesn't go nearly far enough to help solve the climate crisis. Doesn't this government understand it's a climate emergency? While others say it goes way too far, it expects too much too soon when it comes to cutting greenhouse gas emissions. Whatever it is, I can tell you, it's not going to be cheap. It's a $9 billion spending plan. $9 billion. And, I mean, the hits just keep on coming. That gets added to a long list of new items that the Liberal government is going to throw money at. I mean, it's raining money in Ottawa. It's raining money in Ottawa. You think about some of the big ticket items that have been thrown into Chrystia Freeland's shopping cart recently. Dental care, because of the agreement with the New Democrats. Dental care is supposed to be on the way. That's at least $1 billion, at least on the low side. It may be as much as $5 billion on the high side. Then there's pharmacare. Price tag for that, gosh, I've seen numbers all over the place for that. I've seen numbers that pharmacare could cost as much as $32 billion. I have seen, if you want to call it a more reasonable figure of $15 billion on the low side. New fighter jets. 88 brand new F-35 fighter jets. That is a $19 billion purchase. Okay, $19 billion. Yesterday, the climate plan, that's another $9 billion. So that's $44 billion on the low side. $66 billion on the high side. Gosh, there was a time when that was a lot of money. Is that still a lot of money? Billion, ladies and gentlemen. Then there was new money that came as, and we should not forget, the result of litigation and then negotiation between First Nations and the Crown. Remember, the government was taking First Nations children to court over the government's historic neglect of First Nations children. So that has all been remedied now, and that's $40 billion. A big challenge if you're the finance minister and you have an NDP, and the NDP has promised to support you for the next 4 budgets over the next 3 years as long as you dance to the beat of their tune. And the last time that I saw a number about the size of the deficit, it was $73 billion in the hole. That's the starting point. And that wasn't for the full year. That was just for the period between April and November of last year. So federal budget day is next week, 1 week from tomorrow. And to talk about that this morning, what might actually be in that budget document. We will get more on the new climate plan unveiled yesterday in Vancouver by the Prime Minister. He flew there on an airplane. The Environment Minister also flew there on an airplane, and the Natural Resource Minister also on an airplane. We'll be joined by Michael Bernstein. He's not flying on an airplane into City News. We're just going to give him a call. That's what normal people do. He's the executive director of Clean Prosperity. So this climate plan aims to cut Canada's annual greenhouse gas emissions by as much as 45% over 8 years. And as I said, some people are giving it a standing ovation. Others think it doesn't go far enough. And still others think it's nothing but stuff and nonsense. And that this plan can go and sit on the same shelf as all of the other climate change plans from all of the other previous federal governments, liberal or conservative, going back to the Mulroney days. That this is the grand tradition of Canadian governments to set targets, to promise to cut greenhouse gases, and then blow right through the targets. All the while claiming you really do care about the environment and you really do consider fighting climate change to really be the fight of our lives. Yeah, Michael Bernstein has seen it all and heard it all before, so we'll ask him, is this a case of read the new plan, expect the same results as the old? I want to get into this with you during the talkback hour. Climate change and the economy. Okay, $9 billion, your money. Okay, it's your money. It's tax time. You are doing your taxes and sending your money. Well, in my case, it says Shawinigan on my tax return, but $9 billion is what the government is going to take from us. And we are going to do our part once more in the existential battle against global warming, climate change. This plan calls for the oil and gas sector to cut emissions by more than 40% over the next 8 years. No sector of the economy, maybe it's the sector of the economy you work in, no sector, the government says, will be untouched by this plan, and we all have to adapt. The government will decide what kind of vehicles we're going to drive. It will mandate that a certain percentage of vehicles sold in Canada must be electric vehicles. Now, maybe you think that's a good idea because We have no choice because it is a climate crisis. It is a climate emergency. If we don't do stuff like this, we're doomed. It's really that easy. If we don't take drastic steps, like these kinds of steps, greenhouse gases will continue to rise. The planet will continue to warm, and the results will be catastrophic. Catastrophic. And time is running out for real action. We only have until the year 2030. Okay, maybe 2050. But more likely 2030. We have to be, must be, net zero on emissions by the year 2050. No choice. It's we do that or it's all over. So, drastic cuts to emissions, big checks for people so they can buy electric cars, retrofits to homes and other buildings, hundreds of millions of dollars for a network of charging stations. So I'm thinking anyone who was hoping that this government is going to delay its increase to the carbon tax, which is going up later this week, your hopes have been dashed. Question for you. During the talkback hour, 750-1310 after the 10 o'clock news, do you think Canada can cut its emissions almost in half in the next 8 years without hurting the economy? We'll see where that hour goes here on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Callahan from behind his own net. Moskowitz. There's a giveaway. Here's Byers. Shot right on. Mrazek has it.
Ottawa has, for the most part, carried the play in the last 3 or 4 games here, and this is when Barrie's got their chances on poor puck management, puck decisions right there. Ill-advised pass, not a good pass, a turnover, creates the first scoring chance and shot on net for the Barrie Colts in this game. This is what Ottawa's got to do better of tonight, is making sure that their puck management is good. They're crisp and they're solid when they have it.
That's the first action. Scores! The Barrie Colts draw first blood. It's Greg Such. Smith out there now for Ottawa. He's going to head in front of the net. Oh, dig it away. Scores! Dalton Smith camped in front of the net. We are tied at 1. Back to the point. Callahan shot's blocked. And here comes McDonald with a head of steam. Shot scores! McDonald with the long shot. And the Barrie Colts take a 2-1 lead. Back to the point. CC walks. Shot scores! Cody Ceci.
It might have been deflected right away, right when he took the shot. Something changed on the way to the net.
It dipped as it got close to the net. I noticed that. And good cycling. Gus does a great job of being patient with the puck, bringing 2 guys to him.
And he'll win it back to the point. CC. Here's Prince. Traffic in front. Down low. Trying to get scores! With 24.1 seconds to go. Be an icing. Oh, waved off at the last second. Bahena trying to track it down. Rolls deep into the Ottawa zone. CC to meet him. Trying to center it. Bouncing puck in the crease. Scores! With 8.7 to go. Mark Scheifele ties it at 3. Force McNeil to hustle back. Niederberger steers it away. Gustus right on it. Scores! Brad Gustafson from the boards. The Ottawa 67s advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. The little man comes up big for the Ottawa 67s.
He'll never score a bigger goal.
No, that's for sure.
With Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Let's get the very latest update that we can from the Canadian-Ukrainian Congress. We have Cassian Soltykevych back with us on City News. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's nice to hear from you. I want to begin with asking you, I know you're following it very closely. What do you make of these news reports that the Russian military may be pulling back troops from certain areas, withdrawing or retreating from certain areas? When you hear those stories, how do you interpret those? What do you think is going on there?
Well, it shows that Vladimir Putin's plan hasn't gone according to his original plan. It means that he's having to regroup. I don't think that for a minute that this is truly a withdrawal, that he's going to actually send those troops back to their own bases, back to their homes. He's pulling them back to reorganize and to fight somewhere else, whether it is, again, a new attack on Kyiv, on the capital city, or whether he's going to put them into the southeast of the country, where they're doing a little bit better. It's definitely going to be a redeployment. It's not going to be you've done your job and time to go home now. So we should be very cautious of this action and not be fooled that this is a progress in terms of peace talks or anything like that.
Do you have any faith in these peace talks, Cassian?
I think they're helpful in terms of having a dialogue. It shows the world that, Ukraine is of course willing to always have these discussions. We've seen time and time again, the Russian government says one thing and then does another thing. So everything always has to be taken with a grain of salt. But I think they're an important part of the overall picture. But again, Ukraine won't give up and won't accept anything less than full control over its own territory again, because if Ukraine even gives up an inch of land now through some peace talks, then there's nothing stopping the Russian military to invade further again and again every couple of years and continue to destabilize this European nation.
Including that area known as the Donbass? Cassian?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Ukrainians have pulled, and everyone around the world really, and the Ukrainian government say, it includes, we need the Donbass back the land that was invaded in 2014, and Crimea as well. So there's a long way to go, and it's not going to be over in the next week. But Ukraine wants all of its land back, and will fight for it, because they've now seen how well they're doing. Obviously, it's not easy, but they see that the inability for Russia to push how they thought they were going to be able to into Ukraine, so they're ready to fight back and take back all their land.
Okay. In terms of the situation in that country right now, and some of the cities that have been in the news, what are you hearing from the people in Ukraine now about how dire the situation is right there right now?
It's really about those key cities in the east and the southeast that have been decimated because of Russia's frustration, because they couldn't get as much land and territory as they thought they would as quickly. So especially the biggest city is Mariupol in the southeast. Because they couldn't capture it very quickly, they just started indiscriminately shelling. And that continues to be the play that they have. The Russian forces are not well trained. They're not able to move quickly in terms of good combat tactics. So being able to shell a city is relatively easy. You're using rockets from a far distance, or from cruise missiles from ships in the Black Sea, or land-based missiles on the Russian territory itself. So it's a very destructive thing to Ukrainian infrastructure, but it's also very safe from their perspective, as they can fire these rockets and these missiles from a far distance without having to worry about their people. Unfortunately, there still is a humanitarian crisis in many of those cities. Food, water, medicine has not been able to come in for several days or several weeks in some cases, and it's every single day makes it more and more difficult. But I know Ukrainians are doing everything they possibly can to get in as many supplies as they can, wherever they can.
Okay. What do you make of these reports that Ukrainian citizens are basically being rounded up and sent to camps in Russia? Do you think there's any truth to that? Is that true, do you think? Or?
I can't. There's speculation on that.
Yeah.
I don't know how true they are. I'm not an expert in that kind of area. But we of course people are being forced to flee whichever way they can. So if there's a humanitarian corridor, whatever that even looks like, or if they're at gunpoint and there's soldiers around and they're just looking for anything, any food to survive or anything if you haven't eaten for a week, then you're really looking to get out as any way you possibly can. And we hope this is not the case, and we encourage that these are innocent civilians. They should not be. They're not soldiers. Soldiers and prisoners of war are a different situation, but these people should be giving refuge to wherever they want to go, and really being staying in Ukraine and fleeing to the west of the country.
Right. Okay, that's a good point to transition to. What if they want to come to Canada? So the federal government is expected to release more details soon about the plan to settle what it calls an unlimited number of Ukrainian nationals and their families here in Canada. What do you want to hear from the immigration officials here in Canada?
Well, I've been waiting for some time now after they announced this visa stream to come to Canada. We're aware that over 75,000 people have already applied for this visa, but we really need to see departures in our arrival plan. People who are fleeing war have come with a backpack and maybe one suitcase, and that's their whole lives in that. So they don't have the resources to travel to Canada. They need the support financially to be able to come here in terms of an airlift. They need some financial support when they arrive on the ground here. Ukrainians in Canada and our broader Canadian community, I know, has stepped up and is willing to help for providing food and providing shelter, but they need that transitional period. Many of these people arriving here are women and children, and they need the federal support for settlement agencies to be able to guide our Ukrainian communities and our broader Canadian community on how these people need to be settled, who's going to meet them at the airport, who's going to provide that that help on the ground once people start arriving here.
Okay. The fact that there are about 1.4 million Canadians of Ukrainian heritage here in Canada, how could that make the process perhaps a little easier, in your opinion?
It definitely makes it easier in terms of once people are on the ground. We've already seen, I know there was a privately sponsored plane that came to Edmonton that was actually primarily moving cargo back from Edmonton to Poland, but they were able to put some people on that plane. And we see the Ukrainian community rallying around and helping and stepping up to provide food, to provide shelter, to provide jobs to those who want to and are able to work. So we're not looking for long-term support from the federal government in terms of, if people stay here for a year or two. There's lots of support from the broad Canadian community as a whole, not only the Ukrainian community. But what we really need the federal government support is with that transition, helping them get to Canada and helping them in the first, month, 2-3 months for settling here, working with settlement agencies so it can help them. How do you get a social insurance number? How do you get health care? How do you get English as a second language training? So we're not looking for a lot of support, but it's just those key pieces once they arrive here and helping them to get here to be able to ease them into life here in Canada. And then our Ukrainian community and the Canadian community as a whole, we've heard from many cultural groups, are all willing to help. And we know the Canadians will step up and help these people fleeing war.
Okay. So a lot of unanswered questions there by the sounds of it. Is it frustrating, the lack of information that you're getting from the government right now?
Absolutely. It's really confusing to us why it's taken so long from Minister Fraser, the Minister of Immigration, to provide more details. We were slightly more hopeful. There was on Monday, there was a tweet from Minister Fraser that they said they were going to provide language training, orientation, some employment assistance, and some support at key airports. But again, this was a tweet, and this was almost 72 or 48 hours now, and we still don't have more details. So what we really need is a press release that outlines these details. They said there's going to be a 2-week turnaround time on these visas, which is the 2-week turnaround time means tomorrow. So we already know that Ukrainians are going to start arriving in the next coming days, and every day that passes that we don't hear from the federal government means that our communities across the country and Canadians as a whole across the country can't act and can't prepare and can't be organized to help these people. So every hour that we lose from the federal government is more difficult for the volunteers that we have on the ground here.
Okay. Thank you for the update. It's greatly appreciated. Keep us in the loop.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, March 30th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's -3 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. Ukrainian President Zelensky has told the Norwegian parliament in an address that Russia wants to, quote, destroy the foundation of Europe. Zelensky addressed that country's 169-member parliament, saying, the future of Europe is being decided now. For Russia invading Ukraine, Zelensky says, for the Russians, there are no prohibited targets. The provincial government says it's introducing legislation today aimed at increasing the housing supply. Housing Minister Steve Clark expected to table this bill this afternoon. Now, a recent report from a task force examining housing affordability in Ontario found house prices in the province have tripled just in the past decade. Any running around to do today, it's advised you get that done this morning or maybe early this afternoon. We are under a special weather statement. Some snow arriving should be around the 4 o'clock hour or so. That will change over to some freezing rain in the region before temperatures climb above the freezing mark overnight. And then a high of 16 tomorrow for a one-day taste of spring. City News Time, 9:34. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It's time to score your political fix, and we have a great one today with much to discuss with Geoff Turner. He's Vice President at Bluesky Strategy Group. Good morning, Geoff Turner, and welcome back.
Hey, Rob. Good morning to you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the program again. Tim Powers is here. He's Chair of Summa Strategies. Tim, welcome back.
Good to be here, buddy. How are you?
Everything is good here. Everything is 16 degrees tomorrow in Ottawa, Tim. 16 degrees. Just have to get through the freezing rain first. But we're
snow drifts.
We are going to get there, my friend. We're going to get there. Now, who knows what the temperature will be like? Probably smoking red hot on April 7th. That is Federal Budget Day. So, Geoff, let's start with you. What are the challenges facing Chrystia Freeland as she gets ready for Budget Day?
Yeah, wow. And Rob, I mean, just a little background. I supported a budget making in Ontario, very proud to do it for a Minister of Finance, and they are certainly the busiest politician in town for that kind of, 2 to 3 months leading up to the Budget Day. It's an enormous process. And they've been doing this virtually, too, a little less so in this round, but in the last budget as well, which just added all kinds of complexity, like for everybody. I am very impressed that they managed to get it out April 7th. It's about a 2-day delay from where people were expecting it. And if they didn't get it out next week, then it would have to wait until the end of April. Now, the reason I say I'm very impressed is Minister Freeland, as we all know, has been, in her capacity as Deputy Prime Minister, has been out front and center on the convoy issue here in Ottawa. She's been out front and center, of course, on the Ukraine issue. She's a leading, just frankly, an expert in the field on that and has a direct line of sight to all of the issues that are important there for Canadians and for our allies, of course. And I can't imagine how much the challenges that offered her staff and her officials as they needed to brief her, get her, obviously, opinion, but a final approval on many of those items. And that goes to the Prime Minister's office as well, of course, because they were doing all the same things and had all the same pressures. So very impressed that they're getting it out next week.
Okay. What do you think, Tim? What do you think?
When do you say no?
I mean, she's busy.
Yeah, I mean, Geoff will know this, too, from a finance minister's office. So this prime minister and government have signaled pretty much yes to everything and have telegraphed to expect some things, whether it be the 2% of GDP spending on the military, whether it be moving forward on pharmacare and dental care because of the agreement now with the NDP, ongoing investments in climate change announced yesterday. So if Paul Martin was Dr. No, Chrystia Freeland is going to be Dr. Yes plus. But so what is that going to look like, joking aside, in terms of what is going to get that no? What is going to be left off the table? Because there is always disappointment on Budget Day. There'll probably be more delight this year for some. And what is that, again, humor aside, going to mean for us in terms of taxes many of us will have to pay to support all of these programs? So there's lots of positive investment news, but there's a cost for that investment, and I think that'll be the line of attack you'll hear from the Conservatives. And what does the fiscal plan over the next decade look like?
Yeah. Anchors, guardrails, ratios.
If there were guardrails, it's like a bumper cart race. They've been blown away a long time ago.
Okay, but let's pick up on something that Geoff said. Here she's the finance minister, which is a full-time job in and of itself. Deputy Prime Minister, been described in some quarter the minister of everything. She's like the C.D. Howe of this government. If there's a big job to be done, give it to Chrystia Freeland. She'll get it done. Okay, on the Ukraine stuff, front and center. The other day with the Childcare agreement here in Ontario, she was there, gave a speech. But, everybody gave a speech. Nevertheless, she was there, gave a speech. Best friends with Doug Ford kind of thing. Is she doing too much for the government? Is she being torn in too many directions here, Geoff? What do you think, Geoff? What do you think?
No, I haven't seen the evidence of that yet because she seems to be pulling all those things off with Summa Plum. And, I think she's known within, those who are around Part of the Hill as a very high energy, very focused, one of those people who probably only sleeps for 4 hours a night. I'm pretty impressed. I think she has been handling it all. And she certainly, with that minister of everything and those two official hats as minister and deputy prime minister, comes with significant staff and official support. So, those people do hard work to make their bosses look good, and I think they've been doing that.
Yeah. What do you think, Tim?
Well, it may also beg the question, what does it say about the skill set of the rest of the cabinet? And that's not to be too unfair. Look, I think Minister Anand has done a very strong job in defense and is a very good performer. I think Mendocino is showing he's pretty good at public safety. But when you centralize it all in a couple of ministers, you're going to get that public question I just asked about the rest of the cabinet. You're going to get unhappy cabinet ministers potentially because because some do like to work and do like to build a profile. And Geoff will know this better than I. And you get the argument mounting forward that Trudeau is favoring Friedland as his potential successor. So that's going to cause internal irritation, whether that is problematic over time or not. But it's not always good for team dynamics and government effectiveness, quite frankly, if things get centralized. Because yes, Chrystia Freeland may be performing well, but you get a bottleneck at a certain point, and that bottleneck means that the other things get slowed down.
All right. Let's play a little of this just because it's entertaining. This is Prime Minister. He wasn't the Prime Minister yet. He was the leader of the third party at the time, right? He was the Liberal leader, the great hope for the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau, 2015.
The new Liberal government won't buy the overpriced F-35 stealth fighter jet. It's a stealth fighter that will cost tens of billions more than what Harper promised, a stealth fighter that can't defend our Arctic, a stealth fighter that's not actually stealth, and until yesterday, a fighter jet that Stephen Harper's own government put on hold for those same reasons. That F-35 might be Stephen Harper's dream, but I can tell you, for Canadian taxpayers, it'll be a nightmare.
All right. Okay. Wow. That was 2015. So 7 years ago, 7 years later, it is the preferred choice for the Canadian government, and we will buy 88 of them. What do you think happened here on the fighter jet file? Tim Powers.
Well, I have the soundtrack of Top Gun playing in my head. Highway.
Bring back the Iceman. Where's the Iceman?
Well, and in fact, Rob, it all fits, right? Grand conspiracy here. It's got to be Klaus Schwab and the WEF, or the World Economic Forum here, because, of course, the new Top Gun movie comes out.
It comes out.
Fall,
That's
Rob.
right. I saw the trailer on Twitter yesterday.
And what do they fly? They fly F-35s. I mean, come on. I look. I'm glad we're getting a new jet, but this is the Prime Minister can't erase that tape. He can't erase that history. He's got to be held to account for it. Yeah. I mean, the argument will be at least we're getting equipment. Yeah, sure. So if we were going to buy the F-35 all along, and this doesn't just rest at Justin Trudeau, why the hell didn't we buy it a decade ago? Yeah. I mean, it just shows what a mockery the procurement process is at Public Works and Government Services, and has been over a series of years. Let's hope, if we are going to spend 2% of our GDP on the procurement of military equipment, it happens at...
Well, we actually get some military equipment. Like, we actually get some military equipment.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we won't be flying around in the old CF-18s anymore.
It's not just the CF-18s. I mean, it's the shipbuilding program. The shipbuilding, right? The shipbuilding program starts out, we're going to buy 15 ships. They're going to cost $1 billion a ship. It's $14-15 billion procurement. Now it's $6 billion a ship. And where are the ships? This is like the never-ending job prospect for a job project for the shipyard in Halifax.
Yeah,
is this actually a military procurement program, or is it a job maintenance program for Atlantic Canada shipbuilding, for example? I'd like to know. But anyway, I don't want to get too off track here. F-35s circa 2015, bad. F-35s now, greatest thing ever. Let's buy 88 of them. Geoff, what's going on here?
Yeah, I think in the Prime Minister's clip there, you heard him say, a new Liberal government wouldn't buy these, but I guess a slightly older one would. Yeah, look, it's a fiasco. All of these procurement issues, as you've just highlighted, are a fiasco, and it's an awful shame because it really should be happening better. And I mean, really the root problem, on the F-35 specifically first, going back 7 years in time, F-35s were rolling off the line with huge problems. There were lemons. There were lemons arriving at the U.S. Air Force that weren't working, that were requiring fixes. The project was uncertain. There was a lot of uncertainty. It wasn't just sitting on the shelf ready to be grabbed. So just that context is important, but it doesn't excuse that it took us 7 years to come full circle. We do need these things, and we need them fast. I mean, the political issue, it is a political issue, which is we don't have the will and courage to make decisions. And so what we do is we shovel those off into overly bureaucratic, overly, complicated procurement processes. And the whole purpose is nobody wants to be smacked around by an Auditor General's report. Nobody wants to be accused of political favoritism or, having the East Coast Jobs Program, as you just said. They want to cover it up in layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy and rationalizations. And I think what hopefully we're going to start to see going forward is just reining that back. We need value for money. We need economic incentives for jobs and manufacturing here in Canada for those products that will end up serving Canada. We need all these things, but really, I agree entirely. Does it take 8 years? It certainly shouldn't.
No. Okay. When we stop and when we come back here for part 2, it's your political fix, and we'll talk about the big deal this week. Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau come together in Brampton, announced $10 a day childcare. That coincides very nicely with the Ontario election campaign. New federal plan yesterday in the fight against climate change, and Conservatives veering into crazy town. When we come back, Rob Snow Show, City News.
My prayers to the sacred vow, for the ashes I will learn. Tobacco down, my prayers up for the years that I have yearned. This disconnect, I will object, my future won't be burned. I show respect, I will connect, my future won't be turned. When I do this, do it for the youth, indigenous, give it back to my roots. Do it for my kin, do it for the truth. With diligence when I'm back in the booth. When I move in, move for me too. Walk all together, we move as a group. No matter the weather, no matter the route. Birds of a feather, we say full truth. Oh, get my, oh, get my. Just let your spirit guide our future generations. Oh, get my, oh, get my. Just let your spirit guide our future generations. Come on. Oh, get my, oh, get my. Just let your spirit guide our future generations. Oh, get my, oh, get my. Just let your spirit guide our future. Fresh on the scene, follow a dream. Living life clean if you know what I mean. Don't want you to follow, I want you to lead. The youth of tomorrow, they're gonna see. Never let faded, keep my hair braided. Leading a nation with no separation. Know we can make it, know we can break it. Feel the vibration through all generations. Ripple effect, trickle the steps. Bridging the gap with civil context. Don't cripple the next, with little respect. Fixing the past, cause you know we all blessed. Opening doors, use education. Carry the torch with participation. Opening boards, use conversation. The future is yours, it's time that you take it. Oh, get my, oh, get my. Just let your spirit guide our future generations. Oh, get my, oh, get my. Just let your spirit guide our future generations. Come on. Oh, get my, oh, get my. Just let your spirit guide our future generations. Oh, get my, oh, get my. Just let your spirit guide our future generations. Revitalize traditions, let the youth bring it back. Revitalize traditions, let the future bring it back. Revitalize traditions, let the youth bring it back. Revitalize traditions, let the future bring it back. Woo! Oh, get my. Just let your spirit guide our future generations. Oh, get my, oh, get my. Just let your spirit guide our future generations. Oh, get my, oh, get my. Just let your spirit guide our future generations.
Pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Okay, lots of smiles all around. Ontario, the final province, the last province to sign on to the federal government's childcare agreement that will eventually see the average price for childcare in the province of Ontario reduced to $10 a day. But what do you think? Geoff Turner's with us, Vice President, Bluesky Strategy Group. Tim Powers, the Chair of Summa Strategies. Geoff Turner, Vice President, Bluesky Strategy Group. What do you think of the timing of Doug Ford's childcare deal with Justin Trudeau?
Unfortunately, not a surprise to anybody, is it? I mean, we all knew this guy was dragging his feet to try to launch us on the eve of the election campaign. I'll give him credit; they managed to extract more money from the federal government, and they certainly will crow about that, and they get those bragging rights. I think that, for a premier and for many in this country who speak about the cost of living going up, and nowhere is that apparent to parents of young children who are spending between $10,000 and $20,000 a year on childcare, or more in some cases if they have multiple children, of course.
Yep.
Doing that deal 6 months ago would have saved those families $3,000 in the last 6 months alone, just based on cutting the fees in half, not even $10 a day. So, it is a bit rich to say that, that we've come in late and everything's fine, when in fact that would have actually saved Ontario taxpayers. So I think it's kind of bad political play on the premier's part. He'll get good results from it, but it's kind of bad faith politics, if I can put it that way. But for the Trudeau guys, I mean, I also remember in Ontario a long time ago, we were negotiating with teachers unions. 2 out of the 3 big ones took a deal. The third one said no. And when they came back to the table, they found that they had a worse deal in front of them, and they ended up having to take it. And the reason why is because they said no when everybody else said yes. And the political hack in me would have maybe liked to see the Trudeau government say, hey, if you want to drag your feet this long, it's good enough for everybody else. Good enough for Jason Kenney. Good enough for Scott Moe. Good enough for Blaine Higgs.
Yeah.
Good enough for Francois Legault.
Yeah.
Come on back and let's see. But hey, look, they're good guys. They're Boy Scouts. They want to see this done. They want to see it implemented. So good on them. They've made it happen on both sides. And as a parent of a young child, I'm looking forward to those savings for my child care account. And the $10 a day will benefit people in about 3 or 4 years from now, of course.
Tim Powers, what do you think, Tim, the way this played out for Premier Ford?
Geez, I didn't think Doug Ford would displace Geoff as the more magnanimous person. My goodness, I'm shocked this morning. Geoff's a very nice fellow. Look, it's a win-win for both of them. Geoff, fair points that the provincial Liberals, I'm sure, will make about what you could have gotten earlier had this been done, but this is a big win. And I think there's a lesson there where I know we're going to talk about Bitcoin and crypto crazy and all that nonsense in a few moments. Pragmatic governance still matters to conservative voters and voters who conservatives want to sway their way. Yeah. So Geoff gave the list of all the conservative premiers that have signed on to this. There isn't a fight anymore about whether it's beer and popcorn money, as our friend Scott Reed got in trouble for many years ago, Rob saying, or if it's just the kind of policy and service that is needed now. And Ford certainly recognizes
I mean, it's not just Ford though, as Geoff points out. It's supposedly it's the resistance. Right? It's Ford, it's Moe, it's Kenney.
Because they should have.
Right.
They should have.
Right.
I mean,
is this a turning point? The way conservatives are now looking at the value of a program like childcare or early learning. I mean, this used to be basically it was the battle of the baby bonus checks before.
I don't know if it's that. I think it's where the turning point is the battle of the cohort, and who are more voter. What is the largest voting cohort in the country? It's millennials now, and as Geoff points out, millennials are becoming parents. They're finding they're shorter on dollars. They're finding that unlike their parents, both parents are working and working a lot. And they're finding daycare has improved over time, and there've been lots of lessons learned. It's good for socialization. So you don't need to be a conservative, a liberal, or a New Democrat to appreciate that. If you're a millennial and or Gen Z right now, this is your reality, and you look at any politician who doesn't address it seriously as being out of touch.
Rob, if I could just jump in quickly.
ahead.
I think the other thing I see that's changed really materially in the last maybe 5 years or less is that childcare has really evolved in the political mind and in those partisan battles, as Tim describes, from a social policy, you know, helping women and helping children and education, to an economic policy. And the reason we know that now, and I think there's a broad acceptance, is Quebec has been doing this experiment for over a decade. Yeah. And in Quebec, you can see the tax rolls going up, you can see the economic participation of women going up, and it is healthy and strong for the total economy. So it's not just a looking after women and children issue anymore.
The price also went up, too. The price also went up. They used to tout $7 a day. It's not $7 a day, and now it's based on a sliding scale based on your income. Long wait times, too, and that's going to be the challenge for all of these programs is spaces, available spaces. And that's the next big thing. But I do wonder if the fact that Mo and Kenny and Ford have all signed on to this, do you guys think does that box in Poilievre? The last time I talked to Poilievre about daycare, he went on about how it's not $10 a day, and don't call it $10 a day. It's really $70 a day, and they take the other $60 from your taxes. And all. You know, it was a real hard no, is what I heard from him, and I wonder if he's boxed in on it now. So,
Look, anything that doesn't come from Pierre's mouth is not good in Pierre's mind. So there is that point, sarcasm aside. And Pierre's trumping, I think, more of the Harper orthodoxy and all of that. Yeah. I would be shocked were he to become conservative leader and he become prime minister that he would try to undo this. Okay. Absolutely shocked. Yeah. There's no... He can scream loudly about this as the wrong approach, but particularly if it's not until 2025 and he wins, you won't hear a peep out of him on it.
Okay. Do you agree with that, Geoff? Do you agree with that analysis on that one?
Yeah, I think I won't dispute Tim. He would know Pierre better than I do. I think there's no doubt that he's in campaign mode and he's going after a certain kind of conservative member or potential conservative member, and they tend to hold those feelings that we just discussed. Yeah. But I think the vast majority of voters. So, would he pivot in government? Who's to know? Who's to know whether he would be true blue or whether he'd pivot just like everybody else?
All right. Okay. Is he going to just speaking with sticking with Poilievre for a moment here, like too far outside of the mainstream, talking about we're going to be the blockchain leaders in freedom. The Bank of Canada doesn't know what it's doing. Bunch of dummies debasing our currency. I mean, is he driving the bus into Crazy Town here? What do you think?
Well, first of all, embracing Bitcoin. Well, staying up late at night watching Bitcoin, as he and his wife apparently do. Well, that's good for them. That's interesting for them, Rob. I remember when yours and my late night TV, our options were limited in Atlantic Canada, and we just hoped it was Saturday night and the Blue Noe was on. So that says Pierre is so much more of an advanced person than you and I. But this Bitcoin stuff is cracked, right? Meaning the value of it is hard to understand.
Right. Yeah, the value of the coins, the blockchain technology. The blockchain technology is what holds the promise, I think, for...
But it's also about value too, right? Anyway, go ahead, Geoff. Sorry.
Well, actually, just a week ago, Rob and Tim, $650 million was stolen by hackers out of what's called a bridge between those things. So it's not perfect, and saying that you get to opt out of inflation so somebody can steal your money is maybe not the solution. I think my read on this, it's not for the general public, it's not for general consumption. It's probably never going to happen. But if you look at this, the Venn diagram of Pierre Poilievre supporters or potential supporters and dude bros or crypto bros, it's a perfect circle. So really, he's out there cultivating supporters, selling memberships, fundraising, probably from groups of people who have made some wild gains on their crypto accounts and are willing to spend some money his way too. So I think this is all about data harvesting and cultivating members and speaking to a certain segment of his preferred base.
And he is good at that, Rob, as we all know. Look, Pierre's probably done a better job than any of the candidates we've seen so far in speaking to very niche audiences. You had him on the radio because all he talks to are very specific audiences where he can get data and drive conservative messages right now. And that is more concerning for me over time. I get it's a leadership race. I get their strategy. But this is a dangerous turn in politics, just speaking to the people who want to hear you all the time.
Absolutely. Out of that,
you got to get out of the echo chambers.
WEF stuff and the conspiracy stuff about a year and a half ago, before all of his leadership ambitions started, he was out there cultivating the conspiracy set on Twitter, and it was 100% data harvesting just for his leadership, and it's a shame.
Okay. Well, but maybe effective to win a leadership. I don't know about the general election. That's the big unknown for me. Look, we didn't have time to get into the climate file, but that will still be an issue next week, I suspect. I really appreciate your time this week, and we'll speak soon.
Take care, buddy.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Geoff Turner from Bluesky and Tim Powers from Summa. I want to talk about this climate change plan that was released yesterday by the Trudeau government with you during the talkback hour. I mean, it calls for greenhouse gas emissions to be almost cut in half. Not quite, but almost cut in half in 8 years. Just 8 years from now. Can we do that without hurting the economy? Let's get into it. 750-1310 after the news on City News.
There's stability that you can count on, the fans can count on, the players, the vendors, and I am very, very committed to making this team a success both on the ice and off the ice.
Ottawa is a very political city, and it's not just political with the people in Parliament. You got street politics, you got business politics, you got basketball politics, and if you don't know how to navigate the systems, you get left behind. I did. They thought I went crazy. They thought I was dead. I was. But it's never too late to heal, to rebuild, to reinvent yourself. Prezi.
There we go.
He's going back in, okay?
It's a new season of The New Fly Fisher on Rogers TV.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, March 30th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, under a freezing rain warning. More on that in a moment. It's -3 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. A day after announcing plans to raise taxes on foreign home buyers in the provincial housing market, provincial government is about to make another pre-election move this afternoon to get more construction going in the effort to increase the housing supply. Here's our senior business editor, Mike Eppel.
The Ford government will introduce a bill today aimed at speeding up the pace at which cities approve housing developments. The CBC reports it's one of the first pieces of legislation described as the government's long-term strategy to address the root causes of the province's housing problem. An official with knowledge of the plan tells the CBC the bill focuses on making the planning process work better, smoother, and faster for developers and cities to build affordable housing. This after the provincially appointed task force on housing affordability urged the government to set a target of 1.5 million new homes to be built in the coming decade. That task force report, according to the CBC, did not go over well with many of the mayors and councils, specifically in the GTA and the 905, which is expected to be a battleground in the provincial election. The Ford government on Tuesday announced it's raising the provincial foreign buyers tax on residential real estate to 20% and expanding its scope to apply province-wide. At the City News Business Center, I'm Mike Eppel.
City News Time, 10:04. We're under a freezing rain warning. It's now for the area stretching Cornwall through Ottawa and Smiths Falls. With the forecast, here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Mixed precipitation on the way, but not until later into the afternoon, into the evening. We'll start with some light snow. The high +2. Snow will change over to a mix of rain and snow through the evening and a risk of freezing rain overnight as the temperature rises. For today, the high +2.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's -3 degrees. No breakthrough in the latest round of ceasefire talks that were held between Russia and Ukraine.
The deal for a ceasefire in Ukraine has yet to be reached. Talks have been going on this week between Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul, Turkey, in areas bombed by the Russians. The situation is getting more dire. In the port city of Mariupol, new satellite images reveal the extent of the devastation, including apartment building after apartment building destroyed, and long lines forming outside grocery stores. People desperate for supplies. City officials say people are beginning to die of starvation. I'm Inez de la Quatera at the ABC News Foreign Desk in Paris.
Now, the Ukrainian President Zelensky has told the Norwegian Parliament in an address to the 169 members of that body today that Russia wants to destroy the foundation of Europe. Williams Lake First Nation Chief Willie Sellers believes the federal government role in advancing reconciliation should include support for economic development and key community needs like housing. He's going to be looking for long-term funding to support that community's search for unmarked graves at a former residential school site in BC when the Prime Minister visits today. Sellers says his community and others need that financial support for their work from start to finish. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Do you think Canada can cut greenhouse gas emissions 40 to 45% in the next 8 years without hurting the economy? Let's take it from there. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. That is my driving question for the Talkback Hour, and I would love to hear from you. Let's talk about the fight against climate change and the federal government's new climate change fighting plan that was released yesterday and announced yesterday. I think if the measures in this do ever come to pass, which, you read the commentaries today, it's no sure thing that that's going to happen. But if it ever does, it could have huge ramifications for every Canadian. This report, long awaited, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And I think the view of it largely depends on people's own opinions about what they think this country should be doing to help solve the climate crisis. Some are praising this plan, and they're calling it bold, and they're calling it ambitious, while others think it's weak-kneed, and it's not nearly enough given the gravity of the situation being an existential climate crisis. That if we don't get our act together, and soon, we're doomed. Okay. Now, the Prime Minister yesterday, in his speech in Vancouver, called it doable. They're doing this because it's achievable. That's what he said. Now, what I want to ask you, we got into a little bit into this yesterday. Really want to kind of sink our teeth into it today. Do you think Canada can do this? Is it achievable? Can we cut greenhouse gas emissions almost in half in 8 years by the year 2030 without doing damage to the economy, without hurting the economy? Okay. 750-1310. 750-1310. 613-750-1310. Maybe you think this is the stuff of fantasy land. The track record of this government is really no better than the governments that came before them, including the Harper government. And the Martin government, and the Crouch government, the Mulroney government. They're great at setting Targets for greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Great about talking about all the promise of the green economy and the need to transition out of fossil fuels. They're great at flying off to global climate conferences and signing on the dotted line of climate conference agreements. But that's all they're really great at. Because when the people in charge of crunching the emissions data at the end of any given year do that, what they find is that this government's record has been the same as all the rest. Okay, they just blow right through the targets. This government couldn't even meet the targets that they promised under the Paris Climate Accord. And those targets are now considered inadequate to prevent the worst of the climate crisis from unfolding. Live on the Supper Hour News, as so often it does, wildfires and floods and, atmospheric rivers and devastated infrastructure, all the rest of it, all the consequences of a warming world. So maybe many years from now, we'll look back on this day and say, well, it was just meet the new plan, same as the old plan, and that's all it was a plan. That's totally possible. But what I really want to ask you, do you think it's possible, doable and achievable, that as a nation we could cut our emissions in half without harming the economy? 750-1310. 750-1310. 613-750-1310. 2 lines available. One of them's yours. I'd love to hear from you as we talk about climate change and the economy. Greg is in the East End. Good morning, Greg. You're on City News.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm okay. Greg, do you think we can cut our emissions in half without hurting the Canadian economy?
2 things. It seems pretty unlikely. The reason I say that is that we live in a world of many different countries, and those other countries that are far greater emitters will continue along with their production processes. Their cost of capital will not go up as they continue the status quo. I use an example of how the Europeans have been very good at reducing their reductions, whereas the Indians and the Chinese have continued, no judgment, they've continued status quo. The cost of energy in Europe has gone way up, whereas the cost of coal-fired power and so forth in jurisdictions outside of Europe have not. The result of which is that climate affecting emissions have increased, even though the Europeans have been marvelous at adopting strategies. So it's a drop in the bucket in a multipolar world with many different jurisdictions.
We used to worry about these. Used to call that carbon leakage. You remember that term, carbon leakage?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's almost as though that's come to pass, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You look at I believe in climate change.
Sure thing. Yeah.
But I was going to say one more thing is that there's an Ottawa fella, billionaire, Chamath Palihapitiya, grew up in Ottawa.
Yeah. He was a Facebook guy, early Facebook guy, right?
Yeah. And he had an interesting point on his podcast a couple weeks ago that, the rolling stock of vehicles in the world is about 1.2 billion, something to that effect. And that the production capacity, given copper and nickel and so forth, would only ever allow at most about 50 million EVs per year. It would require radical ESG change to allow for more mining, because a lot of these mining projects are quite environmentally challenging. So if we're going to get rid of all these combustion engines, where are the cars coming from? And I just cite the experts, like Geoff, far smarter guy than I, and he'd be a great guest for you to discuss this, because he has his own sort of plans with solar and so forth.
Okay.
But where are these cars coming from? And so basically these cars are not for you and I, they're for guys in Rockcliffe. Ironically, Chamath grew up in poverty. His mom a chambermaid just down the street for where old Justy and his rich kid friends went to Rockcliffe Public. And he sort of Chamath talks about the trauma having gone to school with these rich kids at Lisgar. You can tell, right? Like that it's something that really burns him.
Wow. Okay. Well,
so
maybe it must have motivated him. He did very well. He did very well, right? He's a part owner of an NBA team now, as I understand it. Is he not?
Yeah. But you see the point he makes, though, right? Is that it's just not possible to replace the rolling stock
because of production capacity. Sure, Greg, great points. Yeah, and thanks for pointing us in that direction. Let's take another one here. Stittsville, Diane.
Oh, hi, Rob.
Yeah, hi, Diane. Great to hear from you. Do you think...
No, it's not possible.
Not possible.
No,
okay.
The plan is very deceptive.
Okay.
They haven't met any of the goals yet.
No.
And I want to give you two examples. They're building right near the Canadian Tire Centre about 50 homes. So it takes 2 minutes to drive there. And then 5 minutes along Maple Grove, another 50 homes are being built.
Okay.
If the government was serious, all of these homes would have had electric and solar panels on them.
Okay.
I mean, this deal is, our prime minister's been there for 6 years, and Ford is saying today we need more housing. So if we need more housing, that's going to... and besides, we're bringing in more refugees, and we need them. And they're going to need housing. Okay, the other point I want to make quickly is the 88 new F-35 jets.
Yes.
How much fuel are they going to need? There's going to have to be a lot of training on these jets. We probably only need 40 F-35 jets.
Okay.
And so, none of these goals are going to be met by 2030, or we're all going to be freezing in our homes.
All right, Diane. Okay. Thank you.
Rob.
Thank you, Diane. Okay. Kempville. Russell, you're on City News.
Rob.
Hi, Russell.
How are you?
I'm okay, Russell. Do you think it's possible for Canada to cut its emissions almost in half in 8 years without hurting the economy?
Not a chance.
Not a chance. Okay.
No, I don't even think people, especially, so I'm from Western Canada. I moved to Ontario about 6 years ago now. I don't think people in this side of the country really have an understanding of how reliant on oil and gas everything that we do is. Absolutely everything. So if you want to reduce our emissions by 50%, sure. How much food do you want on the counter, like on the shelf? How many of these plastic things do you want to buy and purchase? Like, we're talking a major, major decrease in quality of life in Canada to almost third world standards if you want to go this route. My other thing is I'm a heavy duty mechanic. I work on diesel engines.
Right. Right.
They put out maybe a little bit of carbon dioxide, and that's it. I run them in my shop perfectly safely without worrying about anybody.
It? Really? Out of the tailpipe of a diesel truck? Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
They've been regulated for almost 10 years now. So we have no diesel particulate matter going into our atmosphere. We have no noxious NOx gases.
You have no greenhouse gases come out the tailpipe of a diesel truck. Is that what you're trying to do?
That's exactly what I'm telling you. And
really?
Unless you consider carbon dioxide a greenhouse gas.
Oh, it is considered a greenhouse gas. It is considered a greenhouse gas.
I've listened to carbon scientists have this discussion and this debate.
Right.
So what happens when we're below 130 parts per million carbon dioxide in our atmosphere?
Right.
Trees start to starve.
Okay.
Like they can't breathe anything.
You think it won't happen unless we're willing to accept a much lower standard of living?
The reality is, for it to happen, we would have to.
Okay. I think you're right, Russell. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I think you're paying off.
I love that we agree, Rob.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Yeah. I think he's right, and I'll explain why as we make our way through the hour. Rob Snow Show, City News, talking about climate change and the economy at 750-1310.
It's so important, and I know I do come on and I talk about this a lot, but every 60 seconds somebody in Canada needs blood, and so it's important to keep reinstilling the message of donating and continuing to get new blood donors to come into our system to support. We have 1 in 2 Canadians who are in need of blood at any given time, but only 1 in 81 people actually donate. So we need to improve those statistics.
Yeah, and helping to improve those statistics. You guys are always coming up with new campaigns, and you've got a new campaign now. Tell me about the campaign.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm happy to. It's kind of about Canadians. We sacrifice everything for people we know and for people we don't. Canadians show up for other Canadians, and we do this out of the goodness of our heart. And right now, especially right now, through the pandemic and, the winter months and the snowstorms, we've had a lot of canceled appointments. We've had, a decline in the number of people who are able to show up for their appointments. And right now, what we really need is for everybody who's eligible to hear the call to show up for patients. So patients in Canada need blood. We want you to show up. We want you to say we're here for you. And with currently only 4% of Canadians who donate blood, we want more people to show up and improve those numbers and really make sure that the hospital patients are comfortable and that they know that blood will always be there for them when and where they need it.
Yeah, and Jan, you mentioned the pandemic, right? And that probably, as you said, had it's one of the biggest reasons why people perhaps have stopped. But you do have health and safety protocols, and we want to encourage people and let them know that those health and safety protocols remain in place. Let's talk a little bit about those.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, our workforce, our volunteers, everybody who works within the blood donor clinic is fully vaccinated. And we have many wellness procedures throughout step by step. If you donated through the pandemic, you'll notice the distancing, you'll notice the wellness stations, the health checks at the front end, some more eligibility criteria, as you can imagine. But all of it is just to make sure that the experience itself is safe and reliable. And now we need people to come in and go through that process with us so that the end outcome, again, is that lovely unit of blood going to a hospital somewhere to help a patient.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Do you think Canada can cut greenhouse gas emissions by as much as 45% by the year 2030 in the next 8 years without hurting the economy, without damaging the economy, without sacrificing economic growth? 750-1310. 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Kat in Greeley. Kat.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. How do you answer that question?
Definitely not.
Definitely not. Okay. Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
I just don't think it's achievable.
Don't think it's achievable? Okay.
Without hurting the economy. And plus, if by some miracle they do happen to do it, if other countries and nations are not complying, what's the point?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
And also, hurting the economy where we're already supporting, not by choice, a lot of people coming into the country, which would be affected by this economy blast even more.
Okay.
So, and honestly, I think a lot of the things Mr. Trudeau says, he has all his minions that just go along with it and agree with him.
Right. Okay.
They don't look at the big picture.
Not looking at the big picture. Okay, Kat, thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
Not achievable, Kat says. Okay, Kevin in Canada. Kevin, good morning.
Yeah, hi, good morning.
Hi, Kevin. Do you think we can cut our greenhouse gases almost in half, nationwide, annual basis, in 8 years without hurting the economy?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Okay, all right.
Yeah, and there's a couple of quick little points I'd like to make. I'll try and be quick.
Sure thing, yeah.
Who puts out the most CO2 in the world? Like which countries? The top 3 countries that put out CO2.
I believe it would be China, the United States. Third, I'd say Russia, but I'm not sure. It might be India. I'm not sure, but
India. So if they're almost China and Russia are using a lot of coal, like they're building, I think they have like 240 coal plants on the drawing board to be built in the next 5 to 10 years. What if we flooded their market with oil? Wouldn't it be better for them, or oil or natural gas?
Or natural gas, for sure, natural gas.
A heck of a lot better for the world than twiddling with our minuscule economy. Then it would be a lot better to flood their market with gas. And we could do that if we didn't have these dandelions running around saying that pipelines will destroy the world, when there's probably about 70 million miles of pipeline under the earth right now. I mean, every city, every.
Of course, yeah.
So if we did that, we could save the planet. We could do that by getting these people off coal, getting them onto natural gas.
Yeah. China, I read a statistic this morning. China consumes more coal than every other country in the world combined. One country.
Yeah. So let's
right.
say we could put the pipelines through that we're trying to do. We'd make a ton of money, and we'd sell it to the Chinese and the Russians. And once all this Russia nonsense is over, and then and India, I'm sure we could get it to them, and we would probably knock like 40 or 50% of the CO2 in the world down in 10 years. But there's no way that's going to happen, because people don't do the math. And they don't look at everything. They just look at our tiny little corner of the neighborhood and say, if we don't pollute, the rest of the world can forget itself. We'll just look at our own stuff. That's what I think. I think if we could do it, if we
did something different.
If we did something different.
Right.
And the last thing I want to say is that we are nowhere near the infrastructure that we need. Like it'll take 50 or 60 years just to think of the massive amounts of rewiring of hydro.
To electrify, you mean? To electrify. Yeah.
And then where does that energy come from to create electricity? A lot of it comes from nuclear, and that's I don't really like nuclear myself.
Well, the environment minister doesn't like it either. I don't know what the prime minister's opinion is on new nuclear.
But they never look at anything else. They just look at our own little neighborhood, and we don't contribute anything really. I mean, we do, but I mean, what about a hydro? We have the potential for billions and trillions of kilowatts of hydro in Canada. We never try to look at that.
Well, I mean, we should ask Hydro-Quebec, because Hydro-Quebec is very good at selling its hydroelectricity to our neighbors to the south. Not so good about selling it to Ontario, but very good at selling it to the Americans. Kevin, thank you. Thank you. Speaking of Hydro-Quebec, to Hull and Kevin. Kevin, good morning, Kevin.
Hey, good morning to you.
Hi, Kevin.
Based on that last caller, Kevin, I'd say instead of flooding China with oil, let's flood them with, we're not going to buy your stuff until you do clean up.
Okay.
As well as India and that too. But as far as these goals go, it's unlikely that they would be met. I would argue to those who think we'll be in a third world, like some of the European countries who have drastically reduced their carbon. Are they now third world? It doesn't seem so to me.
No, they're in a tough spot, though, right now.
And sure, there might be some economic pain, but gee, should we not try it all? I think it's a matter of working together with other countries. Like if you look at how's the ruble been in the last month, right? That's because of a war.
Mm-hmm.
If the countries who really are serious about this unified, we can certainly put the heat on the countries that are not to get on board, and we don't have to buy.
You think we could limit the damage to the economy?
I do. There, and I think so. I heard a program a week or so ago about a guy who had set the Guinness Book of World Records for driving the farthest on one tank of gas, and there was like 7 or 8 tips he had on basically hardly using your brakes was what it was about. Like, you don't accelerate, and get off the ramp.
Don't decelerate, don't accelerate, that kind of thing.
It seemed, up to 50% reduction in your...
All right, I'm never stopping at a stop sign again, Kevin. We got I'm rolling right through. Kevin, thank you for your call. Be back right after the news. It's halftime on the Talkback Hour. It's climate change and the economy. Today, it's a hot one. This is City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, March 30th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now under a freezing rain warning in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's -1 degree. And here's what's making news this hour. Legislation aimed at increasing housing in Ontario being introduced this afternoon at Queen's Park. Housing Minister Steve Clark says this will be a mix of small and bold measures to solve the housing crisis. That a provincially appointed task force made 55 recommendations to ease in a report just last month. There's been tremendous response to the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, people of Ukrainian descent and others offering their help, goods, and money to get refugees over to this country. The head of that group says while people are stepping up, the federal government has to do more. The full story for you coming up at 11 o'clock. As COVID indicators show a greater presence of the virus in things like our wastewater yet again, the province reporting the number of people in hospital has gone down today after a jump yesterday. Currently, 778 people in hospital. Of that number, 165 are in the ICU. That number is unchanged from yesterday. There have also been 13 more deaths in the province in the last day from COVID-19. Former Chief of Defense Staff General Jonathan Vance has pleaded guilty to a count of obstruction of justice. Vance's lawyer confirmed the plea during a virtual court appearance this morning. More on this story as well, coming up at 11. City News Time, 10:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Do you think Canada can cut greenhouse gas emissions by as much as 45% in just 8 years without hurting the economy? Because that's the plan from the Trudeau government. Outlined yesterday during a speech in Vancouver. You know, I maybe I shouldn't worry so much, but I do find reasons to worry. My biggest worry is that I look at what's happening around the world, and I fear we're going to repeat some of the same mistakes. And I also think, shouldn't this be Canada's time to shine? You know, but we have a government in Ottawa, and a government that's going to now remain in Ottawa for the next 3 years. It just doesn't seem to clue in to the potential, or doesn't want to, and instead just wants to limit the potential for our economy for ideological reasons. That there is a shortage of energy right now worldwide. You see it in the prices that we're paying for energy. And in parts of Europe where they have, or at least they had, even what you could call more aggressive plans to fight climate change than our own, well, they are now regretting some of the decisions that they made. Okay, and it's not just oil and gas. There are other shortages as well that we could easily fill. Base metals that we have in abundance, nickel, copper, rare earth minerals that we have in abundance and no plan to do anything with, so crucial in electric cars. All the agricultural commodities like wheat and corn. I mean, we're a leader in this. We are a leader in this. And I just see so much real potential for the Canadian economy in those industries, the potential for serious economic growth and job creation. But I just don't have any faith that we have a government that recognizes it. It can't see the forest for the trees. And this government isn't even very good at planting trees. But on the other side, you have the threat that is evident from climate change. How many disasters do we need to put on the news? Like Lytton, British Columbia, burns to the ground in an afternoon. Wildfires rip through Fort McMurray. Horrible drought-like conditions this summer in Western Canada. Whole sections of the Trans-Canada Highway in British Columbia and in Nova Scotia just torn apart by floods, atmospheric rivers all along the Ottawa River here. 2 years out of 3, just terrible floods. We've covered all of these things as news reporters. It's not like I'm some kind of dinosaur, but people also need jobs and good paying jobs. They need hope. that they can keep up with the rising cost of living. And look at the bills that are coming our way. There are massive cost increases coming our way simply because of the demographics. The cost for things like healthcare, long-term care, the promises that we have made, our obligations for things like public pensions and Social Security, retirement benefits. These costs in the next 20 years are going to increase like we have never seen before. And the only reason, to the caller's last point, the only reason I think right now we enjoy the standard of living that we enjoy today is because of our abundance of natural resources. Like nothing rivals the importance of that industry. Nothing rivals the importance of that industry. Not auto parts or aerospace or financial services or professional services. You look at employment hours, wages earned, international balance of payments, trade surplus. I'm telling you, we're in rough shape without natural resources. And I just don't find that this government has any appreciation for that at all. Everything is colored through the green lens. Joanne in Orleans, you're on City News. Joanne.
Good morning. Your previous callers have made some excellent points that I've believed for the last 20 years, so I won't repeat them. I certainly agree that climate change targets would destroy our economy. It would turn us into a third world country, and you just have to ask yourself, why? Why are they doing this? Mm-hmm. It's to save the planet. Well, others have pointed out, if other countries are not controlling their emissions, you're not saving the planet. It won't work.
Won't work.
So why? And I think this is the kind of climate, forgive the pun, where you have conspiracy theories and they abound. For me, I personally believe it's a form of economic treason. What could be the reason that the Liberals are hell-bent on these targets that will destroy our own nation? And I think it's because they have deep, deep economic ties to China. So is this, a destabilizing effort for the world order, or is it simply for the rich to get richer? Because it won't work.
Won't work. Okay.
Why are the Liberals sacrificing generations of Canadians from a good future, our children, our children's children? Now I am convinced it's Liberals and some Conservatives want Charest to run and be leader of the Conservative Party. Yep. And you're thinking, for heaven's sakes, he's been in China's back pocket. Terry Glavin has written extensively about Charest's involvement with China. I just am... I don't understand the purpose, since it's not going to be...
you don't think it'll be good for Canada? It won't be good for the economy.
Or the planet.
It won't work. Won't work. Okay.
And if I can address some of your points, because I am a Neanderthal, and I do believe things that are out of date, but I honestly think that what we have had in our weather disasters has shown that, the same way the pandemic showed us things about ourselves, is that our development is not resilient. We are building in floodplains. We are building in fire zones. No one is doing forest management anymore. They took a lake and drained it, and 100 years later it turned back into a lake because of human hubris. Respect nature, protect it, keep it clean, keep it pure, take care of it, using the knowledge we know. But it's not necessarily climate change, because every time there's one of these weather things, they say, we've had them before. Not often, but we've had them before. What's the difference? Well, maybe you don't have 100,000 people living there 100 years ago.
Okay.
That's my analysis, observation.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you. Thank you for sharing it. Okay. Back to our question. Our question is, look, according to this climate plan that was released yesterday by the federal government, the plan is this country because the clock is ticking on the climate crisis. We are planning to cut our greenhouse gas emissions by 45% in 8 years by the year 2030. Can we do that without hurting the economy? Rick in Canada. Rick, you're on City News.
Yeah, hi. How are you
Rick.
today?
I'm good, Rick. Thank you.
First of all, I've got to congratulate you on the level of comment by you and by your listeners. It's good to hear because it's a lot better than what you're getting from Parliament.
Okay.
I just want to make a couple of points because there are a number of issues that were raised today. Are we going to meet the target? Probably not. But in looking at what's happening and you know, when you say that, you know, what they're doing, the government, is basically nothing's based on policy. And the concerns going forward that I would be most concerned with today are food, agriculture. Look what's happening in Ukraine. That's not going to end soon. That's the breadbasket of the world. We're going to be short of food.
Right.
If we're looking at, you know, natural gas, I mean, you know, Europe's going to be short. So, I mean, the issues they're going to have to be dealing with. I mean, really and truly, with Trudeau coming back, he's promised the European leaders, you know, he's going to meet the targets, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a lot of confusion that's going on. For example, if you're looking at it, we're supposed to be, you know, tied in with the states. Look what the states did to us with the pipeline. Now, in terms, they haven't really cut off their purchases from Russia yet. You know, they're looking for their excess, you know, gas and oil. They're looking to South America, you know, Venezuela, you know.
Iran.
So you're looking at it, you're dealing and setting policy in a world of great confusion.
Okay.
You know, when you look at it and you say, what is the right thing to do? And if you look at it, for example, the agricultural people out west, they're going to want cuts on the, you know, on GST and taxes that are, you know, that are being imposed. If you look at it, you know the government's not going to do anything about it. They need the cash so much, you know, that they're going to tax the people at one time where they would be making money from this increase in production. They're not going to make. So if you look at it, you say to yourself, I think we somehow have to sit back and get better leaders at the federal level. And, you know, the NDP have not been criticized. I mean, the Conservatives haven't done well because the NDP, instead of splitting the vote, you know, have really left the Liberals in a position that they're the only, you know, middle, you know,
right.
left left.
Okay.
So
right.
I'm raising a number of points, not with solutions, but you look at it and you say to yourself, we got a budget coming up. I'm hoping we're really critical in terms of what the government is doing there and how they're going to solve the food crisis, how we're going to solve, you know, the, you know, energy crisis throughout the world, and what's the balance? Because, you know, Canada is only 2% of the, you know, the carbon problem in the world. I mean, the real problem is China, United States, India, Russia, you know.
Yep.
I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, great points, Rick. Great points. Thank you. I greatly appreciate your compliments. This one here is Gavin in Kinburn. Gavin.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you on the show, Gavin.
I just think, like most Canadians, I almost feel as if, you know, we're being spread a little too thin, and I don't think it really makes sense that they're pushing so hard for this carbon when we're already in very good shape. And I live in the West, and I have a little farm, and I don't think people also who are already stretched so thin or even realize how, you know, these prices that we're seeing now, we haven't even factored in $2 a liter diesel fuel for our tractors, and we are eliminating natural gas, which we use to make our chemical fertilizers, and I think it's going to get worse.
You haven't planted anything yet.
Exactly.
With $2 a liter
these are going to be the most
diesel.
expensive crops we've ever grown, and things are already, you know, getting so expensive. I just don't understand. It seems like, as you know, just as a regular Canadian, it feels like they're going to bankrupt us all. It's terrifying, really.
I didn't even think about that, to be honest with you. You haven't even planted anything, let alone harvest.
Well, and I don't think a lot of people have that support this, and people blindly support it and don't really ask enough questions. I think they're going to get a wake-up call here in about a year.
All right, Gavin.
People are, you know.
What are you growing out there?
Wheat, corn and soy.
Okay. What?
But yeah,
I heard that fertilizer. I heard fertilizer costs doubled. Is that true?
Exactly.
They double.
It does, absolutely. Yeah.
I know a dairy farmer spent something like $50. He ordered some that cost him last year $50,000. It was $100,000.
Yeah, and in the rural areas, we don't have access to natural gas. We're paying 70% more this year for propane than last year. And we're paying HST on the carbon tax.
Never ends. Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Thanks,
it goes up on Friday, too, by the way. Hate to break that to you, Gavin.
Take
Okay,
care.
1047, climate change and the economy. Yeah, think about that. $2. Around the corner, it's $2.07 a liter for diesel. And the farmer has yet to plant anything right now. So what is it going to cost to plant those crops and then harvest them? And what is going to be the end cost for you when you go to your neighborhood grocer? Okay, something to think about there. 750-1310, Rob Snow Show, City News.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Do you think Canada can cut greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 45% in 8 years without hurting the economy? Keith in Shawville. Keith, you're on City News. Keith.
No, of course it's going to affect I just want to bring your attention to a book. It's called Unsettled. It's by Stephen E. Coonan. He was Undersecretary of Science, Department of Energy, under the Obama administration. And the title of his book says it all, Unsettled. A lot of this climate stuff is not settled.
Okay.
And, for instance, he's talking about the journalists, the climate reporters. Their mission is largely predetermined. They don't have a narrative, a doom to report. They won't get into the paper. They won't get their articles published. So a lot of this is so overblown. The climate models are exaggerated.
Well, whether it's overblown, whether it's exaggerated, it's not the debate. This is now the policy. It's mandated, okay, that we have to achieve these targets. Apparently,
I know.
Maybe the Conservatives win the next election and they find it all stuff and nonsense and rip it up. I don't know. That might be a tough sell for Canadians.
I know, but if people were aware of this guy, I wish you could get him on as a guest. But anyways,
right.
Yes, there is some climate change, but it's
what I want to get at is, you don't think we could cut our emissions almost in half in 8 years without damaging the economy? You think there would be economic damage there?
Of course. And where are we going to get the electricity for all these electric-powered cars? I just...
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Keith in Shawville. Bye. Thank you. This line here is Dave, Ottawa. Dave.
Good day.
Yeah. Hi, Dave. What do you think, Dave?
Well, I think if they put the targets as set are definitely going to have an impact on our economy.
Yeah.
I would like to bring up sort of a side point to all of this, if I may.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
The inflation rate was pegged in December to be something like 4.9%, and now they've pegged it to be very close to 6%.
5.7 was the last reading. That was a February number. Tomorrow, day after tomorrow, is April 1st. So who knows what it's going to be now.
Okay, well, my point being is that they're slapping this carbon tax on top of what is existing inflation, which is going to cause more inflation, obviously. Mm-hmm. The people that are on Canada pension received an increase of 2.1%.
2.1%
from last year to this year.
So in real dollar terms, you took a cut.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
The people on pension have dropped by 4%.
Exactly.
And then you factor in the real inflation that's going to be coming this year. According to the Canada Pension webpage, they've got this fancy equation where they take the average inflation for the past 12 months. But like the figure that they came up with was in November, and it was already radically low. So it's interesting that the federal government seems to want to make poor people poorer by their policies.
All right, Dave. Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too, Sue. Yeah, you too, sir. Thank you. And Sue. Paul in Canada. You're on City News. Paul.
Yeah, hi, Rob.
Hi, Paul.
Actually, just calling, some of your previous callers already touched on this point, but I guess what I wanted to kind of chip in with was I think we're going to have problems to meet this, to answer your question, to meet this target.
Okay.
And the main reason I see is it kind of depends across the country because we're quite different. But I think when you look at sort of ways we reduce the greenhouse gases, seems to be primarily moving to electric power. And the one province where that actually works is Quebec. They have a surplus of power. They were trying to get approval for a big power line transmission line down to Massachusetts, which it was either Vermont or New Hampshire said no. That was about 6 months ago.
Yes, I remember something in the news about that, not the specifics. Yeah.
Yeah, so they got extra power. They're exporting it. Right now, I looked at energyhub.org just to give a perspective. Quebec is 7.3 cents per kilowatt hour. Ontario is almost double at 13. Alberta is 16.6. Ontario's relying on nuclear reactors that are over 40 years old.
They need to be, there's a plan to refurbish them, and it's very expensive. Yes.
Yeah. And
energyhub.org, you said?
It was energyhub.org. If you just Google residential electricity prices, Ontario versus Quebec, you'll get. But
interesting. I'll look that up.
This is an indication that they have excess power. The other thing is too that again with Quebec is Labrador produces power, electric power, but Quebec charges such a high tariff to route it through their system.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
To get to the market that it's not viable. And in my opinion, actually, this is a very political thing, this green thing, because, it really makes sense for Quebec, maybe not so much for the rest of Canada. And it reminds me of sort of what happened with asbestos. And the asbestos industry was supported in Quebec for decades when it was already a pariah across the world. But it was an industry in Quebec. And it's similar to a greenhouse gas oil industry, but that's in Alberta, and that's being attacked now, right?
Yeah.
So and again, the only other thing is I'd say I think if Trudeau waved his magic wand and everybody had an electric vehicle, if we all plugged them in the wall, we'd have a giant blackout everywhere except Quebec.
Yeah, maybe. Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, yeah.
Bye.
Last call. It's Bill in Ottawa. Bill.
Good morning, Rob. I'm thinking about electricity, too. I think that there's no way this government's going to meet any of those.
Any of the targets, okay.
Any of the targets, because they're not even thinking about solutions, really.
Okay.
It's going to take something really big to resolve what they're setting out to do. And I go back to Tesla and his idea that there's enough electrical power generated in the atmosphere, the upper atmosphere of Earth, to supply the whole world with electricity if he could tap into it. And I think his idea is about tapping into the naturally produced electrical power. He thought it was abundant enough to supply the whole world if he could do it. And he didn't do it in his time, but I remember he tried to get backing from Westinghouse, and Westinghouse wouldn't back it because he didn't want to produce something that would be provided free. And he couldn't make any money off that, he thought.
Okay. All right, Bill, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, good to hear from everybody today. That's a hot issue. We may talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. Coming up next, we're going to turn our attention to COVID-19 and the possibility that we could be going into another wave of COVID-19, which would be what would it be? Wave number 6, sixth wave. Dr. Christopher Labos, Montreal-based epidemiologist and cardiologist, after the news on City News.
There's stability that you can count on, the fans can count on, the players, the vendors, and I am very, very committed to making this team a success both on the ice and off the ice.
Ottawa is a very political city, and it's not just political with the people in Parliament. You got street politics, you got business politics, you got basketball politics, and if you don't know how to navigate the systems, you get left behind. I did. They thought I went crazy. They thought I was dead. I was. But it's never too late to heal, to rebuild, to reinvent yourself. Prezi.
There we go.
Hey, going back in, okay?
It's a new season of The New Fly Fisher on Rogers TV.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, March 30th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, under a freezing rain warning in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's -1 degree. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The number of people fleeing Ukraine is about 10% of that country's population now, over 4 million people. Now, some are destined for Canada, but the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress is once again taking aim at the federal government for a lack of programs in place to help out. Here's City News reporter Chris Curries.
Cassian Soltykevych tells City News any Ukrainians fleeing war and wanting to come to Canada are being let down by the federal government, with over 75,000 already applying for a visa.
But we really need to see departures in our arrival plan. People who are fleeing war have come with a backpack and maybe one suitcase, and that's their whole lives in that. So they don't have the resources to travel to Canada. They need the support financially to be able to come here in terms of an airlift.
The National Secretary of the UCC says the government needs to provide some basics, like accessing a social insurance number, health care, and English as a second language, and some financial assistance early on. But the love and support from Canadians with or without Ukrainian heritage will be the longer-term solution. Chris Curries, City News.
City News time, 11:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Mixed precipitation on the way, but not until later into the afternoon, into the evening. We'll start with some light snow. The high +2. Snow will change over to a mix of rain and snow through the evening and a risk of freezing rain overnight as the temperature rises. For today, the high +2.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's -1 degree. Former Chief of Defense Staff General Jonathan Vance has pleaded guilty to one charge of obstruction of justice. His lawyer, Rodney Seller, confirmed that plea during a virtual court appearance this morning. Military police charged a former Canadian Armed Forces commander back in July, alleging in court documents Vance repeatedly contacted a woman in February of 2021 and tried to persuade her to make false statements about their past relationship to military investigators. City News time, 11:03. Provincial government plans to introduce legislation today to tackle the housing crisis.
Ontario's housing minister will introduce legislation at Queen's Park today to increase the amount of homes available. This is likely to be based on the Housing Affordability Task Force, which published a report in February of this year calling for 1.5 million new homes to be built within the next 10 years. To do this, the report calls for more density. It says zoning laws should be amended to allow up to 4-story buildings to be built on lots currently zoned for 1 2-story home. Right now, 70% of land in Toronto is zoned for detached or semi-detached homes. This could see that amended. The government is also increasing the foreign buyers tax to 20%, up from the current 15%, to try and crack down on speculation. Home prices in Ontario have nearly tripled in the last 10 years. Richard Southern, City News.
City News time, 11:04. As COVID indicators show a greater presence in things like our wastewater, the province is reporting the number of people in hospital actually went down just a little bit today. Following a jump in cases yesterday, the number is down by 12 to 778 people, 165 in the ICU, and that is the same as yesterday. There have also been 13 more deaths recorded in the province in the last day from COVID-19. And Ottawa police are asking for help identifying a couple of suspects in an armed robbery late last year. 2 people entered a financial institution along Bank between Heron and Walkley. It was about 7 in the evening, Thursday, December 30th. Both men demanded cash, and one of them was carrying a shotgun. No cash was turned over. The suspects fled. Full description of the pair can be found at ottawa.citynews.ca. Anyone with information is asked to contact Ottawa Police. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
We're going to have a 6th wave of COVID-19. Let's talk about the state of the pandemic right now. Dr. Christopher Labos, Montreal-based epidemiologist, cardiologist, joins us this morning on City News. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
How would you describe the current state of COVID-19 right now?
I think things are starting to turn in the wrong direction. I think if you look at, whatever metric you want to choose to look at, whether it's the wastewater testing, where it's, the daily cases based on our limited PCR testing, whether it's the positivity rate, everything seems to suggest that COVID cases are going upwards, right? We are entering what looks like the sixth wave, driven largely by the BA2 variant. So the same sort of cycle that we've seen before has repeated itself. What happens in Europe tends to come over here to North America a few weeks after the fact, and so we're seeing the same sort of pattern again. So the only difference compared to previous waves is that now we're not really testing as widely as we used to. So whereas before you had a very good sense of how much COVID was out there because there was widespread PCR testing, now we have to infer and guess to a little bit, but when you look at the clues that we do have, it does suggest that we are beginning a sixth wave.
Okay, but a sixth wave, but how comparable is a sixth wave to a second or a third wave, given vaccination rates?
Well, we'll see. We don't know. It's going to depend how infectious BA2 is relative to the other variants. It's going to depend, do people get reinfected or not? And it's going to depend on how people behave. Remember, there were a lot of people who said the Omicron variant was going to be mild and not cause major disruptions. Well, that was clearly wrong. The Omicron wave was the worst we had. So we sometimes tend to lull ourselves into a false sense of security by saying variants are mild and they won't cause problems. The issue here is that even a mild variant, if it's more infectious, means more people will get sick. So if the variant, let's say, is half as serious, if it's 10 times as infectious, you're still going to have more people getting sick. So the other wrinkle that we have to remember is that at least during December of 2021, people were still wearing masks. There were public health measures in place. We had PCR testing, so it was easy to know who had COVID. We've undone a lot of that. So if anything, we've created more favorable conditions for the virus to spread. So that we're in a sixth wave, I think, is very hard to argue. Now, how big is it going to be? How significant is it going to be? A lot is going to depend on how we behave going forward and whether we take basic measures to sort of protect ourselves and limit its impact.
Okay. How would you describe the BA2 variant? How does it compare to previous variants?
So it's very similar structurally to BA1, the original Omicron variant that caused the fifth wave in, December, January. So it is very similar. It appears to be more infectious. That's why it's overtaking BA1 and becoming the dominant strain. Whether it's more severe or not, that remains, I think, a little bit uncertain. It is probably comparable. The vaccine efficacy against BA2 is probably roughly comparable. So it's a little bit unclear how it's going to behave. A lot of people are sort of banking on the fact that if you caught Omicron, you won't catch BA2, and that might end up being true, but it also might not. There have been isolated reports of people who caught BA1 and then caught BA2 again, because the point you have to remember is that if you had a relatively mild infection from Omicron, it's probable that you didn't develop that many antibodies. Remember, not every viral infection is created equal, and you don't generate the same antibody response. The good thing about vaccination is that it's a standardized dose, so everybody should generate more or less the same antibody response, with obviously some variation based on the person's own individual immune system. But we have to make educated guesses on a lot of these things because we don't have the data, but we should guard against being, I think, too optimistic and assuming the best case scenario is always going to play out in our favor, because sometimes it might not.
Okay. What should we be doing? What should we be doing? Personally, what should we be doing?
I think just basic, precautionary measures. First of all, anybody who hasn't gotten their third dose, who hasn't gotten their booster, should go out and get their booster. We talk about having a high vaccination rate in this country. It's actually not that high. If you look at the number of people who have gotten their third doses, it's in the 50% range. It's not 90%, contrary to popular belief. Now, somebody who caught Omicron in December, January, probably is going to be well suited by waiting a couple of months after the infection to make sure that they maximize the benefit they get from that booster dose. So, that interval is in the nowish period. So definitely, wait that appropriate interval, but get your third dose. and I would still wear a mask. If you're going to be in a public setting, indoors, with a bunch of other people you don't know, and you're all breathing the same air, I would wear a mask. I think it costs you nothing to do so, and it provides a huge benefit. Get a proper mask, like a proper surgical mask, or even an N95 mask if you have access to those sorts of devices.
Yeah. I don't know about you. My own impression is, even though mask mandates have been lifted, for example, here in Ontario, you don't need to wear a mask in most public settings anymore. Healthcare settings you do, public transit you do, but that's about it. My impression is most people are still wearing their mask anyway. Is that your impression, Doctor? What are you seeing out there, just personally?
Yeah, it's more or less the same thing. I mean, there has been some relaxation amongst people, even here in Quebec, even though the mask mandate is still technically in place, scheduled to come off in a few weeks' time. But yeah, I think most people are still wearing the masks. I think most people understand the rationale for it and really understand that, this is an airborne virus. If you're going to be, in a subway or a bus packed cheek to jowl with a bunch of other people, it makes sense to wear a mask. If you've ever been in a situation where somebody has coughed on you when you're in the subway, you understand how easy it is for viruses to spread. And I think most people have also realized they haven't gotten sick in the past 2 years, right? The one sort of bizarre side effect of the pandemic is that most people have not, nobody caught the flu during the initial part of the pandemic. There was, very little cold circulating. So we make a huge difference in terms of avoiding getting sick by wearing a mask in public settings. And I think our conception of masks is going to change and bring us, much more in line with what a lot of other countries do. Go to some parts of the world, like go to Japan. During cold and flu season, if you're sick, people wear masks to walk around to avoid infecting others.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just
a cultural thing, though. That's like embedded into the culture, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And I think our culture might shift towards that to realize, like, hey, if you're sick, wear a mask. If you're going to be in a public setting, wear a mask. It's going to be like carrying an umbrella with you. I think it's going to become almost second nature to many people.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay. How much of this is unexpected? That restrictions would be eased. People could go into restaurants again, gather with family and loved ones again, travel again. Mask mandates going by the wayside, the vaccine certificates, all of this stuff. So how surprising is it really that there's an increase in cases? Or even hospitalization. It's not surprising anybody, right? Yeah.
No, I mean, it shouldn't be. And I mean, we saw this coming. We saw the surge of cases in China and Europe. I mean, we did essentially nothing to prevent it from happening. So we shouldn't be too shocked that this sort of thing is happening. You see some individuals saying, well, this was expected. We were expecting cases to go up. And it's like, sure, listen, some of the more restrictive measures are unsustainable in the long term. But a lot of things are very, very easy, and there's a lot of stuff that we can do that doesn't have a major impact on the economy, or to put it more accurately, there's stuff that we need to do that is going to require a fundamental shift in how we approach things. Like if you want to have people in indoor office buildings, then that's fine, but we need to be much more conscious about indoor air quality than we were before. Same with schools, right? You want to have children in school? Yes, of course, but in the same way that we would get very, very upset if you found out there was asbestos in the walls of your children's school, we probably need to start looking about air quality in schools. Now, all of these things are not going to affect people's day-to-day lives. They're not going to affect your ability to enjoy life, but they are issues that we have to deal with. Paid sick leave, another issue that came up during the pandemic. I mean, we have to look at this stuff because you don't want people showing up to work sick, whether it's COVID or the flu or the common cold. There is an economic cost to having your workers off sick. So these are issues we have to look at, and we can't let them fall by the wayside just because we don't want to speak about COVID anymore.
Yeah, but that attitude is there, and this is what I wanted to wrap up with you because, and I know you understand this. You've been in the midst of this along with everybody else. The prevailing opinion seems to be these days, well, we've got to move on. We have to learn to live with this thing. It's not going anywhere. COVID zero is unrealistic. Let's shore up our acute care hospitals. Let's put that iron ring once and for all around long-term care. Protect the vulnerable, the aged, and the immunocompromised. And the rest of us get vaccinated, and we should be fine. What would you say to that?
I think there's a difference between learning to live with COVID and ignoring COVID. And we are dangerously close to being in an area where we're just ignoring COVID. Like, if you wanted to live with COVID, it doesn't make sense to me that you wouldn't let people get tested for COVID. Like, if you want to limit the impacts of COVID, the best way to do that is to test people and do appropriate contact tracing, which we're not doing anymore. You would have people wear masks in public settings. That limits COVID and doesn't really affect your life in any way. So we can learn to live with COVID in the same way that we've learned to live with other pandemics. I mean, we learned to live with AIDS, HIV, right? It's no longer the acute crisis that it was in the early 1980s, but we learned to live with it by changing our approach to the virus and how we dealt with sex in general. So learning to live with a problem usually involves adapting to the problem, not sort of stubbornly insisting on doing the same thing that you were doing before. So we can learn to live with COVID, but we have to evolve as well and change the way we approach the stuff. And again, just to harp back on what I said before, it's going to involve us realizing that indoor air quality is an issue we have to take much more seriously than we were taking before.
Thank you, Doctor, for the conversation. Greatly appreciated. Dr. Christopher Labos, Montreal-based epidemiologist, cardiologist. When we come back, Transit Commission meeting is happening today in City Affairs. We'll talk about it with Pat Uguccioni from your Community Voice newspapers. This is The Rob Snow Show, and this is City News.
That's how I like it to sound. It's burning to the power of tears. It gets too hard to pick up. I know that one day it's gonna break down, 'cause I'm running to the ground. It's only got so many tracks left around the sun. It's rusting out of gasoline, baby. When you're trying to drive it as far as you can. It's hard getting started now and it's shaking like it didn't before. I know that one day it's gonna break down, 'cause I'm running to the ground. It's only got so many treads left around the sun. Got this party that I was given, I've been pushing it as hard as I can. I'm not talking about athletic marathon. I know that one day it's gonna break down, 'cause I'm running to the ground. It's only got so many trips left around the sun.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
All right, let's find out what's going on at City Hall today. But just before that, Pat Uguccioni is here, your Community Voice Managing Editor. Hi, Pat.
Good morning.
How are you these days?
I'm good. I'm great, thanks.
All right. If you will allow me, I have, you'll be interested in this, special statement from Dr. Etches. This is some timing here because I just did an interview on the sixth wave, Pat, the sixth wave. So this is from Ottawa Public Health, Ottawa Chief Medical Officer of Health. Okay. We continue to see evidence that the level of COVID-19 in Ottawa is rising. The COVID-19 wastewater viral signal is very high and increasing, as is Ottawa's test percent positivity. Hospitalizations and outbreaks are currently stable. However, we know these are lagging indicators, and wastewater levels can provide an early signal of trends to follow. Today, Ottawa Public Health posted on social media a snapshot of the trends we are seeing in Ottawa. The pandemic is not over, and we are currently experiencing another resurgence. Ottawa Public Health has informed Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health of the concerning levels, Pat, concerning levels in Ottawa. The province is carefully monitoring the impact on health system capacity and reaching out directly to people over 50 who could benefit from another dose of vaccine. We highly recommend Ottawa residents to get vaccinated with all doses of vaccine that you are eligible for as soon as possible. Compared to 2 doses, a third dose provides stronger protection against hospitalization as well as symptomatic infection. For some at higher risk, 4th dose is needed. Visit our website regularly. We recommend individuals continue wearing a mask indoors, especially when physical distancing may not be possible or proves to be challenging in crowded areas. If you become unwell or have any symptoms, stay home, do not attend work, go to school when you are sick. Have a plan in the event of you or someone in your household needing to isolate. Visit the province of Ontario, speak to your primary care provider, COVID-19 antiviral treatment, and visit our website here, and here. Okay. Well, there you go. What a downer that is, eh, Pat?
Well, yeah. Speaking on a personal level, my spouse is immunocompromised, so we're very, very careful in this household. We have our rapid antigen tests at the ready, but you can't avoid contact of any kind. And I think more so than any other point in the 2 years, I know so many people that have caught COVID in the last few months, as opposed to earlier on. So it's still there for sure. But
still there, not out of it. But I wonder what the response will be like this time from municipal or provincial officials. Somebody asked me this morning, what is Doug Ford going to do if there's a big wave? And I said, well, what can he do? It's 2 months to go before the election. He's not going to close things down again like 2 months before the election.
But the message has been we need to live. We have to learn how to live with it. So I think we're only at 50% of people getting their third dose. If they're starting to talk about a 4th dose, I'm not sure what the uptake will be on that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that.
I've always thought that this will become maybe an annual thing. Flu shots,
right? Yeah. Okay. The Transit Commission meeting happening today. Hasn't been one of those in a while, I don't believe.
No,
right? So
I think they didn't have one in February, so here we are in the last week of March.
So what are they talking about down there today?
So they spent a lot of time this morning, almost the entire meeting so far, and hearing from the GM, Renee Amilcar. She spent a lot of time walking them through numbers about, as I like to say, shining the turd. She's telling us that the light rail is at 99% service availability, but she hasn't put it in context of the numbers of ridership. She hasn't talked about the ridership at all. So our trains are running on time with no one on them, apparently. So.
Right.
So,
has there been any figure at this Transit Commission meeting on what ridership is? I tried to squeeze a number out of Alan Hubely just the other day on that, and he said, well, if you're going to put me on the spot, I would say it's between 30 and 50%.
Yeah, nothing specific so far. That question hasn't come up, or certainly wasn't in your presentation about how many bodies are on our buses.
All right, you're in Transit City out there in Orleans, and I don't know what your transit ridership is now, but I know you used to take it every day. But now you're doing so much of your work at home.
I am on a major transit route, so a bus comes by my house every 8 to 15 minutes, and I can see it out my windows, and it's just as empty as it has been throughout this entire.
Really? Wow. Okay.
A lot of people in Orleans are federal public servants. A lot are work for D&D and the Canadian Armed Forces. So a lot of them are still working at home. Then while they're starting to go back, it's really only one day a week. So it certainly hasn't impacted the numbers on the buses going by my house.
I bring that up, Pat, because the transit budget, and you were here and we were talking about it at the time, it seemed to be built on fairy dust because it was based on a ridership of assumption of 82%.
Right.
We're not going to hit that. We're almost into the 4th month of the year now.
Right, and I think they knew they would never get to 80%, but they're working on the assumption that the difference between 30 and 80, the province will come to the rescue again.
Yeah, well, I don't know how long are they going to keep doing that.
I think once the election.
Their choices are very limited. I mean, they can keep going cap in hand to the federal government. They could, right. I suppose, and this would be popular if somebody wanted to propose it. Popular with a certain segment of the voting public. Put all the costs of public transit on the property tax base and make it quote unquote free. Or make the hard decisions and right-size the thing to a ridership level of 50% or whatever the ridership level happens to be. But nevertheless, we're a little tight on time. So you heard a rumor about the mayor's race? What's the rumor?
Well, I've heard that. I've heard the rumor is that Matthew Fleury has decided not to run for mayor. I think he's told his people, his team, whatever you want to call him, that he won't be running. That's what I've heard, and I've heard it from more than one source, and usually reliable sources. So that's so we're down to three major.
I am very surprised to hear that.
I can only guess, and I've worked on mayor campaigns and I've worked on city councillor campaigns. They're very, very different. It stares you in the face that you need to raise lots of money, like a good $500,000.
Oh, at least $500,000. Yeah.
And that's if you've spent the last few months sort of beating the bush and trying to get commitments, and you're still not there with a month to go from the starting line. That's probably the decision he's taking.
And made all the more difficult if you say, and I'm not going to take anyone's money who's in the development community.
Right. Yeah, that's
right. They're the top donors. Right. Yeah. So.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And a big lot of liberal progressives running in the mayor's race. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So far.
Well, that's a good one. Okay. And since he never declared, we can't say he's dropped out. But I thought he was going to run. So that's a good one. All right, we'll see what he does. Thank you, Pat.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Speak soon. Bye-bye, Pat Uguccioni from your Ottawa Community Voice newspapers, where he's managing editor. Our next newscast in just a minute here. And then we're back right after the news here on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Wednesday, the 30th of March. Good morning, I'm Jason White. A thin cloud sky over the nation's capital. It is 0 in Ottawa, 1 degree in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. Ottawa's top doctor says the capital is seeing another resurgence of COVID-19, and she has alerted provincial health officials to what she calls the concerning levels of COVID-19 in Ottawa. In a written statement just issued by her office, Dr. Vera Etches says the province is carefully monitoring the effects on the health system's capacity. Riding OC Transpo will cost you more come May 1st. The fare increase was delayed from New Year's Day, contingent on Rideau Transit maintenance, making 15 O trains available for the Confederation line on a consistent basis. The first 4 weeks of March have seen the company provide 15 trains 20 times. Provincial legislation to increase available housing in Ontario being tabled this afternoon at Queen's Park. The housing minister says it'll be a mix of small and bold measures to solve the housing crisis. The Ottawa Catholic School Board has a new trustee after a special meeting to replace the late John Curry, who died earlier this year. Marty DeKemp was the chosen replacement. She's a longtime parent volunteer and a former communications person for the Catholic School Board. City News Time, 11:32. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So the latest plan to fight climate change. Released yesterday, new targets for greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Let's get into it. Michael Bernstein back with us, Executive Director, Clean Prosperity. Morning, Michael.
Good morning.
So, from 10,000 feet up, what do you think of it?
It's an important step on a long journey we have to reduce emissions in our country. We have never made a meaningful reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in Canada, and now we are trying to reduce emissions by 40% over the next 8 years. So that is a staggering challenge, and we're going to have to see a lot of different steps and actions taken. But look, yesterday was important. Like, before you build the house, you have to have the blueprint, and so yesterday we got that blueprint. We know where the government wants to go, but what really matters is the construction and the timing of completing the job. So that's what's really ahead of us.
Okay, so what makes this approach to targeting for greenhouse gases different from all the others?
Well, what makes it different is there's a lot more detail, and there's a commitment to continue to report and provide updates. So instead of the government or opposition parties, for that matter, saying here are a number of policies that we think are going to get us there and doing some hand waving, this was saying, look, these are the numbers. So we're going to show you our work. We're going to get to a 20% reduction by 2026. We're going to get to a 40% reduction by 2030. And here's what it's going to look like for the oil and gas sector and for buildings and for transport. And these are the specific policies. So in short, a lot more detail, enough that we can all watch and see, are they really doing what they said they're going to do?
I mean, when I put this to my listeners this morning, a lot of them said, why are we doing this to ourselves here in Canada? Look at China. Consumes more coal than all the other countries of the world combined. Look at other commodity-rich countries that do not have the standards that we have when it comes to oil and gas production or mining or forestry or any of these kinds of things. Why are we doing this when so many other bad actors are not? How would you answer that?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be looking at this as an opportunity, not a burden. It's not to suggest that there won't be challenges along the way, but transitioning to a low carbon economy with cleaner fuels and cleaner energy is the greatest economic opportunity of this generation. It's going to, we already know that private sector investors have committed trillions of dollars of capital to this effort. So I think the real question is, do we want Canada to get our fair share or even more of the economic pie that's available in this transition? And remember, when we make this transition, and no transition is perfectly clean, there will be challenges, but when we make it, we will actually have lower energy costs. Like, solar energy is the lowest cost power in the whole world already. Electric vehicles are coming down in price, and they will be lower cost and save people money, even just within the next few years. So I think the most important thing to remember is this is an opportunity economically for Canada, and so we should pursue it aggressively.
Right. I understand that. Okay. But what about on the emissions side, though? We're being so stringent on ourselves here. Okay, telling our oil and gas sector, you have to cut oil and gas emissions by whatever it is, with 40% or something like that in 8 years, right? In 8 years. But we don't demand the same from other countries, even countries that we import oil from.
Yeah. Look, this is a global transition, and we need, I think your listeners are right to say China and India and others must do their part, and that we need to see more action from them. That's certainly true, although I will tell you that those countries are taking some actions today, even if they're insufficient. But look, in Canada, as Canadians, we can control what we can control, right? And that's our economy and our industry. And our industry sees the same economic opportunity that I was just talking to you about, which is why our oil and gas sector before yesterday has come out with a plan themselves to get to net zero emissions by 2050, including something like a 30% cut over the next 8 years, because they see that if they reduce their emissions, their oil is going to be in more demand than the oil coming from, say, Russia or other places that are sort of nastier parts of the world. So again, even for our industry,
their product will be more marketable, right?
They'll be more marketable, absolutely. And this will be a selling feature for them. So I think this transition is happening. There is no, I don't think we should be debating whether or not it's happening. We should get on the proverbial bus and make the most of it that we can.
Okay. So in places like the oil patch, then, we hear a lot about carbon capture and storage. And there is some language in this plan that was released yesterday that there may be incentives, funding available to accelerate that technology, to help it scale up, if you will. What do you think about that? What is the state of that technology? Is it the real deal? Is it ready for prime time carbon capture and storage? What's your understanding?
It is the real deal, and we are absolutely going to need that technology as part of a package of policies to help us achieve our emissions goals and reach our economic potential as well. So today in Canada, we are already capturing about 4 million tons of carbon dioxide every single year, and we are storing it underground. We know how to do this. We've been doing it for years. Which is not to say there aren't challenges and there's environmental concerns, and we have to be thoughtful about it. But we are going to need this technology, and the plan yesterday called specifically for 30 million tons, so about a 7 times growth of this technology by 2030, which when you're building large infrastructure projects is essentially tomorrow. We got to get going on this stuff if we're really going to be able to make full use of that technology.
Okay. What do you think about the incentives that are in there for electric cars?
Well, I think for a time-limited period, it is okay for us to be spending some government funds to help get certain technologies like electric vehicles over the hump, right? Today, we don't have enough electric vehicles on our road. There's people who are hesitant because they've never used one before, or they have concerns about range anxiety. So look, providing an economic sweetener, saying we're going to give you $5,000, $10,000 back on your vehicle, will get some people to try it out. But over the long run, we need these technologies to stand on their own, because we can't be spending, hundreds of billions of dollars of public money on some of these technologies.
Okay. I want to talk as well. So we've talked about oil and gas, major source of greenhouse gas emissions. Transportation, major source of greenhouse gas emissions. Let's talk. I want to ask you a few things about buildings, because I don't know if there's a lot more in here that I kind of find it wanting, because especially on the home side. I took a call from somebody the other day. I said, look, I'm trying to do everything I can. I've taken personal ownership of this, and that if more people do that, we'd be in a better spot. So I'm going with heat pumps. I'm making my own home more energy efficient. And he's like $60,000 into this thing, all electric furnace. There is precious little on offer from the federal government by way of a rebate for any of that investment that he is making into his own rebate program, and even what he qualifies for from the government. The process is so laborious. You have to get somebody out, they audit your house, then you have to submit everything, they come back, they do a follow-up audit. It's like a years-long process. Do you think maybe there's room for improvement there?
You know, it's a really astute observation. I think you put your finger on probably the most challenging part of the entire plan. Our building sector is an enormous challenge. How we're going to decarbonize more than 10 million buildings over the next 30 years. Like that listener's story you described. Imagine doing 1,000 of those every single day for the next 30 years. That's the challenge in front of us. And so absolutely, we need to see a clearer plan for how we're going to mobilize the necessary money. It's not just government here, private sector, we're going to need real collaboration. How are we going to do that? There are some programs, you just mentioned them, but I agree with you fully. They're too cumbersome, not enough people know about them, there's insufficient money. So if I had a concern about any sector in the economy coming out of yesterday's plan, I think buildings would be my top one. It's hard to see how we're going to get there today.
Major emitter, too, like third largest source of emissions, I believe.
Yep, over 10% of our emissions, and it's each one of our own individual dwellings. Right, so there are no quick fixes here. We've got to go house by house, and we need the contractors too. Actually, that's even a further challenge. How do we get enough workers? But that does speak a little bit to the opportunity piece too, right?
Well, then you're into skilled trades, all of that sort of. Okay. Very interesting. Gosh, so many layers to it. Michael Bernstein, thank you as always. It's really nice to have your perspective on these issues. Thanks again. We'll speak soon.
Great to talk to you. Thanks a lot.
Executive Director, Clean Prosperity. Coming up next, so Ontario and the federal government have a childcare deal that will eventually, some years from now, see the average price of childcare drop to $10 a day. So what has to happen next? The executive director and founder of the Childcare Resource and Research Unit, Martha Friendly, will join us on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
There we go.
Hey, going back in, okay?
It's a new season of the new Fly Fisher on Rogers TV.
Ottawa is a very political city, and it's not just political with the people in Parliament. You got street politics, you got business politics, you got basketball politics, and if you don't know how to navigate the systems, you get left behind. I did. They thought I went crazy. They thought I was dead. I was. But it's never too late to heal, to rebuild, to reinvent yourself. Prezi.
I love to make abundance boards. And why do I call them abundance boards? Because they're an abundance of all the things that you love together. There's no rhyme or reason, there's no rules. It's literally about taking a whole bunch of different ingredients and making them into something that you love, that you can snack on. Maybe curl up on the couch and have a snack night. Charcuterie is all about a meat plate. And antipasti is all about a little bit of meat, a little bit of fruit, and a little bit of snack that you might have at the beginning of a meal, like an appetizer. I like to take all of these concepts and kind of mesh them together. It's kind of like a work of art because you're creating something delicious, but you're also creating something that looks super fancy, like from a gourmet style restaurant, but just using simple things you have.
Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
So, done deal. And one of the big stories of the week will be the Childcare agreement between the Ontario government, the Ford government, and the Trudeau Liberal government at the federal level. So what happens next? What happens next? Executive Director and founder of the Childcare Resource and Research Unit, Martha Friendly, back with us on City News this morning. Good morning.
How are you, Rob?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Are you happy with it, the deal?
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's great to have all 13 jurisdictions, provinces, and territories are now in, which is historic. So, yes, I'm good. I'm good that Ontario has made a deal.
Okay. What do you think about the timing of it?
Well, there isn't much in the agreement that couldn't have been done, and gotten money flowing to parents and service providers, way earlier in the year when the other provinces and territories made their agreements. Good that it happened before the end of the fiscal year, but it should have happened much sooner. But anyway, it's done.
Right. Okay. So, as I understand it, there will be rebates as of retroactive as to, well, I guess the day after tomorrow, April 1st. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
So there is a commitment to actually cut the fees in two chunks, 25% and then 25% later in the year, 25% in April, and there will be a rebate to April 1st. So you're right about that. So the money, that is what parents were looking for, is that they were looking to have their fees. That's one thing parents were looking for, is to have their fees reduced. That was the federal government's commitment, was to reduce fees by half in this year, and that will happen.
Okay. Yeah. So 25% in April, 25% in December.
That's right.
Right. So
there's a couple of the other provinces are actually doing it in two whacks. So that's arranged differently in different places, and so that's I'm pleased with that. That's meeting the commitment.
Right. Who, under your understanding, who issues the rebate then?
Oh, see, that's the kind of thing that isn't clear yet. You're asking whether it's going to be the child care center or the
government
province itself or the municipality.
Or the municipality.
So a lot of the details aren't clear yet. We certainly don't have the agreement yet, and that's not uncommon. We don't have agreements in some of the provinces where the agreement was reached months ago. So the expectation was not that there would be an agreement the day after, although it was actually in a couple of cases. But anyway, we don't have the agreement. Right. And there was a technical phone call, which was really for service providers yesterday, that many people were on with the province, and it was an opportunity to ask questions, but there were 3,000 people in it. It was a Zoom call. So those kinds of questions some of them are not clear yet. And I think service providers want to know that. So to me, that isn't clear yet there's going to be a rebate and a fee reduction, which are, two different parts of it. I don't know who the rebate is coming from yet.
What would be the easiest way to do something like that, do you think?
Probably through the municipalities. I think so, because the municipalities are the local service managers for the province, 47, separate, entities. And I think that would be the easiest, and that was discussed, but I actually don't know that that's what's going to happen. Because the fact is that the names of parents, who the parents are, is only known to the centers, really.
Right.
So, that's the kind of, there's many details.
Lots of things to work out, right?
There's a ton of things to be worked out. It's, it's not simple, and I'm sure that the province and the municipality and probably service providers, and I'm saying centers as a shorthand because it includes regulated family child care as well. But I'm sure that they've been working some of these details out, but they are being worked out. And I think the really important things are, yes, there will be a fee reduction. It sounds like it will be actually a 50% fee reduction in the course of the year. And, that's great. That's one part of the agreement, one very important part of the agreement. It's not the whole of the agreement.
Right. What are the other important parts of the agreement?
Yeah, so from the perspective of building a system and meeting families' needs, there has got to be expansion, and it's been a commitment that the expansion will be primarily in the public and nonprofit childcare sectors. And then the question, has arisen, is there going to be capital money for that coming down the pipe in the federal budget? That's also not known yet. But there's a commitment to a certain number of expansion spaces in all the agreements. In the Ontario agreement, they made a commitment to expand 86,000 licensed spaces in 5 years. But some of those are already not only in the works, but some of them actually are already open. They actually, that's kind of backdated to 2019. So there will be expansion. Now, one of the problems is that the demand for expansion is going to go up as fees go down.
Yes.
And so then the question is, will there be enough expansion? And people like I and others who work in this area have been saying that each province and territory really needs to have a plan for expansion. It's fine to say we're going to have expansion, but the way expansion happens in Canada, it waits for somebody to pick it up and decide to expand childcare.
86,000, Martha, it seems like we're going to need more than that.
Oh, absolutely. So, so this isn't, these agreements, it doesn't hold a province to the target. That's just what they agreed to as a target. And from my view, I mean, I just want to go on before I'll answer that when I go on a little bit. The thing is, not only do you have to sort of plan where you're going to put it, whether it's in a school or, wherever it's going to be, but you also have to have the people, the workforce to work in it. And I cannot stress this enough. You can't expand, you can't even maintain the childcare system unless you really address the issues of the workforce. And I don't think there's anybody in the childcare field who doesn't feel disappointed in on the one hand, the recognition that the workforce is really important. I mean, everybody keeps saying that childcare workforces have been heroes and, it's essential. But the commitment to raise wages in the agreement is very modest.
Okay.
And so then the question is going to be, is that all that it's going to be? Because what it's laid out was a floor a wage floor of $18 an hour for people working with children and $20 an hour for people who are a supervisor, and then annual increases of $1 an hour a year up to $25 an hour in 5 years. But I would point out that $25 an hour was the minimum wage that the early childhood organizations in Ontario called for 2 years ago. So this is an area that I think across the board, people are disappointed in the province that this is not a full recognition that you cannot have a childcare system unless you support the workforce. The workforce are the childcare. It's in a childcare center budget. The staff are, in a nonprofit budget, say 85 to 87% of the budget, their compensation, and they are why we have a childcare program. Isn't just a room or a building. It is the people working in it. So when you say am I like these, you have to keep in mind that all these agreements are setting the foundation for building a childcare system. They are not the childcare system yet.
Right.
So when I say I'm disappointed, I'm not disappointed that we have an agreement, and I'm not disappointed that there's a recognition that the workforce is essential as part of it. But the specifics, and it's, I'm quite disappointed. I live in Ontario, and Ontario is a big province and a wealthy province, and we should have done better in Ontario. But I think all across the country, and I think there's a clear recognition of this from everybody, is that this is the beginning, and now we have to start working on it, really working on it from a policy perspective. What is it going to take to bring people into the child care system, like as a viable professional career? Where are we going to put child care centers? How are we going to get child care centers in rural communities where there's less population density? And going back to your first question about affordability, of course, a 50% fee reduction doesn't do the trick, because it's lots of people that it leaves out. And even though they said that the existing fee subsidy system would remain,
okay.
Of course, there's many, many people who are on waiting lists for fee subsidies around Ontario who are perfectly eligible. And to me, it's not the best way to arrange it anyway. So, overall, people are not disappointed that we got this child care system. It's just...
It will be in the doing. It will be in the doing.
It will
right?
be.
Yeah.
You can sort of say, the devil is in the details.
The devil's in the details.
It's in the implementation,
yeah.
really.
Okay. All right. We have to run, Martha. We're out of time. So,
okay.
Look,
well,
thank you. Wonderful. Bye-bye. Martha Friendly.
Thanks.
This program is brought to you by NB.